Hey guys, tonight we begin with the life as one of Blackbeard's crew. A world of damp wooden decks beneath your boots, gunpowder smoke clinging to the back of your throat, and the constant sway of the sea beneath your feet. Far from the treasure-filled legends, these were days spent hauling heavy ropes under a hot sun, waking to the creak of timbers and the sharp bark of orders, and living always with the quiet knowledge that every horizon might bring either fortune or cannon fire. So, while you're getting comfortable, feel free to tap like and subscribe if this kind of calm, late-night history is your thing. And I'd love to know where you're listening from tonight. Drop a comment with your city and what time it was when you pressed play. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Waking up aboard Queen Anne's Revenge is never a gentle experience. You come to not because the sun warms your face or because someone calls your name, but because the groan of timbers and the relentless sway of the ship tug you back to the surface, whether you like it or not. The air around you is thick, muggy, and sour, full of salt and sweat and something older and less identifiable, like damp rope left too long in the rain. There's no light down here below deck, at least not much. Just thin slivers of morning sneaking through cracks between the wooden planks, casting sharp little stripes of brightness that do nothing to soften the gloom. You can hear the low murmur of other men waking up too, their movements slow and stiff, boots scraping against the boards. A cough here, a groan there. The space is cramped, always cramped. You push yourself up from the hard planks, joints stiff from the cold that settles in overnight. There's no cushion, no bedroll worth the name, just your own coat laid out as thin padding between you and splintered wood. If you're lucky, your tobacco pouch is still tucked into your belt and not pilfered in the night. If you're really lucky, no one's rolled over and used you as a pillow. You have to watch your head as you sit up. The beams overhead are low enough to crack a skull if you forget yourself in the dark. You've done that before, twice, maybe more, so now you move slow, mindful of every inch. The air down here is stale, carrying a warm heaviness that never quite leaves. It's the combined breath and sweat of too many men packed into too little space. Even though you've grown used to it, the smell still catches you first thing in the morning. Gunpowder from the weapons stored nearby, mold from the wood, a sour edge of spoiled rum and unwashed clothes. Somewhere, someone's pipe is already lit, risking Blackbeard's temper just to get the first bit of smoke before the day begins. When you finally stand, there's nowhere to stretch fully. Your shoulders hunch automatically to fit the low ceiling. Around you, men shift and shuffle, pulling on belts, checking pistols, making sure nothing essential was lost or stolen overnight. One man spits into the corner, a sound sharp in the otherwise sleepy quiet. Another coughs hard, a rough, wet sound that echoes off the boards. Maybe it's just the damp getting into his lungs, or maybe it's something worse. Out here, a cough can mean the difference between a man's next raid and his last. Above you, the steady creak of the rigging speaks of calm waters this morning. You listen to it without thinking, a rhythm that's become as familiar as your own breath. But you also listen for something else, something that's harder to ignore once you've learned to hear it. Blackbeard's voice. It hasn't come yet, just the normal scrape and shuffle of morning routines. But when it does, it'll cut through everything like a blade through canvas. That voice carries weight, enough to make even the most hardened man snap to attention. You fumble for your pistol, tucked beside your pallet, cold metal against your fingers. It isn't loaded, never is while you're sleeping, but the feel of it is reassurance all the same. A man without his weapon on this ship might as well paint a target on his back. Knife, pistol, powder horn, the essentials. Anything else is extra. When the ladder up appears in the gloom ahead, lit just barely by the slanting light above, you're already moving toward it. Hands sliding along the railing, boots scraping softly against the boards. One man's already ahead of you, shoulders hunched, muttering under his breath as he climbs. You follow, one hand on the rung, pulling yourself up toward the daylight like some creature dragged from the deep. The moment your head clears the hatch, the brightness hits you like a slap. White sky, blinding sun already high, baking the deck and the men on it. You blink against it, squinting until the shapes resolve. Rigging stretched taut against the sky, sails snapping in a gentle breeze, men moving slow and deliberate. There's no shouting yet, just the quiet rhythms of work. And there he is, Blackbeard himself, pacing the deck with his usual silent weight, every step deliberate. His coat flutters in the wind, dark and worn, heavy with salt and smoke. His beard, wild and tangled, bristling with slow-burning fuses that give off the faintest wisp of smoke. It's a show, you know that. A trick to put fear into men's hearts. But even knowing it's just for effect, the sight still sends something cold down your spine. Around you, the rest of the crew shuffles up from below. Men rubbing sleep from their eyes, belting on blades, scratching at the lice in their beards. No one's fresh, no one's clean. And yet, there's a kind of rhythm to it all. A shared understanding. You're pirates. Blackbeard's pirates. Feared from here to the Spanish Main. You glance over the side of the ship, eyes adjusting now. Blue sky stretching out forever. Deep blue water rolling beneath you, steady and endless. Somewhere out there is another ship, another prize waiting to be taken. Or maybe a storm. Or nothing but empty sea for days on end. That's how it goes. A man nearby mutters about the wind, not strong enough to make good time today. Another sharpens his blade with slow, deliberate strokes, the scraping sound soft and steady. Shik-shi-jak, over and over, like the ship's own heartbeat. And then it comes, Blackbeard's voice. Low and rumbling, but clear. Orders barked out without preamble. Check the powder stores. Secure the rigging. Wake the rest. The day's begun. There's no ceremony about it, just work. One famous fact everyone knows. Blackbeard really did tie slow-burning fuses into his beard before battle, the smoke turning him into something out of legend. But one lesser-known truth? Some men claimed he'd go days without a word, wandering the deck silent as a ghost, staring out to sea like he could see something no one else could. And that lingering question always hangs in the air. Did his men follow him out of loyalty? Or sheer, unrelenting fear? You pull a coil of rope from its peg and get to work. Sun burning on your back already, sweat starting to gather under your collar. It isn't glory. It isn't freedom. It's just another long, hot day aboard Queen Anne's Revenge, where nothing is ever quite as romantic as the stories say. There is no such thing as a proper breakfast aboard Queen Anne's Revenge. No roasted meats laid out on platters. No warm loaves of bread fresh from an oven. What you get instead is hardtack, dense, flour-packed biscuits, so tough they could double as ammunition in a pinch, and a slug of rum. The hardtack's mottled with the occasional weevil or two, but you don't waste time picking them out. You either eat or go hungry. And hunger doesn't have much patience out here. The morning heat's already thick as you stand in line near the barrel, where someone's ladling out the day's ration of watered rum. Blackbeard himself doesn't bother with this part. He's already pacing the deck with that slow, deliberate step, eyes always scanning the horizon, beard smoking faintly as if it's smoldering from inside his very skin. The man's like a walking storm cloud, quiet one moment, full of thunder the next. No one's quite sure when he'll strike, and so everyone keeps one eye on their own business and one eye on him. The deck smells of old salt and older gunpowder. Black powder dust clings to everything, from the barrels stacked near the cannons to the threads of your own coat. It's part of the air here, sharp and metallic, catching in the back of your throat as you chew through a mouthful of biscuit, so dry it could splinter your teeth. You wash it down with rum that tastes less like celebration and more like raw necessity. Strong, bitter, rough on the way down, but it warms your stomach and stirs your head just enough to keep you upright. All around, the crew works while they eat. There's no stopping just because your mouth's full. One man's checking the rigging, pulling on ropes that creak under their own weight. Another's leaning over a cannon, tamping down the powder charge left from the last fight. Maintenance here is constant. You don't wait until something breaks. You check, double-check, and triple-check, because when battle comes, there's no second chances. A misfire at the wrong moment means the difference between prize and coffin. You find yourself assigned to the powder barrels today. It isn't the worst task on board, but it isn't the safest either. The powder must be checked every morning, making sure no moisture seeped in. Damp powder won't fire, and in a fight, that could mean disaster. You kneel by the barrels now, lifting the lid carefully, sniffing the air inside. The smell is familiar. Sharp, sulfurous, like scorched earth bottled up and waiting. You stir your hand through the black grains, feeling for clumps. None today. Luck's on your side for once. Above your head, the sails crack in the wind again, filling and pulling the ship forward at a steady clip. The crew's voices rise and fall around you, a mix of curses, shouted orders, and quiet mutterings. Someone's always humming some old song under their breath, the same half-forgotten tune picked up in some port 1,000 miles away. You don't remember the words, but the rhythm sticks with you. Now and then, the sun catches on a blade. The flash of a cutlass, a dagger tucked into a boot, the polished barrel of a pistol laid out for cleaning. Everyone's armed, of course, not just for battle, but for each other. Tempers fray quick on a ship like this, especially with men packed too close together and too much rum in their bellies. Fights break out as often as storms, and Blackbeard's officers are quick to stomp them down. The punishment's as sharp as the blades they carry. A flogging if you're lucky, the noose if you're not. And yet, there's a rhythm to it all, an order beneath the chaos. You wipe powder dust from your hands and lean against the rail for a moment, eyes squinting against the light. The horizon is empty, no sails in sight. For now, the sea stretches endless and blue, glittering like a field of shattered glass. It's almost beautiful, almost. But you know better than to let that fool you. Beauty here can turn to violence in the space of a single breath. A man named Briggs wanders past, pipe clenched between his teeth. He offers you a nod, smoke curling up from the bowl of his pipe to mingle with the ever-present haze of burning matches in Blackbeard's beard. Briggs has been with the crew longer than most, his face marked with a jagged scar down one cheek. Earned, they say, not in battle, but in a drunken brawl over a spilled drink. It's always the little things that get men killed. One well-known fact echoes in your mind. Blackbeard was said to command not just through violence, but through sheer presence. Those smoldering matches weren't just for show. They were part of a carefully crafted image, making him look half man, half demon. But here's a lesser-known truth. Blackbeard also carried 6 pistols strapped across his chest during battle, each one loaded because reloading in the thick of a fight took too long. It's that mix of spectacle and brutal practicality that kept his crew in line. And yet, there's something no historian can quite settle. Did Blackbeard ever really intend to keep the pirate's life forever? Or was he always looking for some final score, big enough to buy a quiet end? Some hidden harbor where he could drop anchor for good? No one knows. And now, standing here with the sun hot on your back and the powder barrels checked, you wonder the same thing yourself. Breakfast over, rum settling in your stomach like a warm stone, you turn back to work. There's always more rope to coil, more blades to sharpen, more powder to measure out. The legend of piracy isn't gold and freedom. It's endless labor, sweat soaking into wood, and the smell of black powder that never quite leaves your skin. The days aboard Queen Anne's Revenge stretch long and relentless, bound not by clocks or calendars, but by the rhythm of the sea. There's no true division between morning and afternoon, just sun climbing high and then sinking again, casting the deck from white-hot glare into deepening shadow. You spend hours coiling rope, checking knots, shifting sails, or simply pacing alongside the rail to keep your legs from growing stiff. Sometimes, the work is enough to distract you from the ache in your shoulders or the hunger gnawing in your gut. Other times, it's all you can do to keep moving, muscles sore and mind numb from the repetition. One day bleeds into the next beneath an unchanging sky, and though the sea may look peaceful, you know better than to trust it. The sky can change in an instant out here. One moment it's blue as a polished blade. The next a bank of black clouds appears on the horizon, creeping in like some slow-moving beast. You feel it in the air before you see it. Pressure dropping, wind shifting, that prickling sense along the back of your neck that says something's coming. And when it comes, it doesn't come gently. The first time you sail through a true storm aboard Blackbeard's ship, you learn quickly there's no room for hesitation. The sky turns from blue to slate gray, then nearly black. Wind howls through the rigging like a chorus of ghosts. The sails snap and shudder, ropes straining against their moorings. Rain lashes down so hard, it feels like being pelted with gravel, and the deck turns slick beneath your boots in seconds. You don't get to huddle below deck. No one does. Every hand is needed topside when the storm rolls in. You find yourself gripping ropes, so tight your fingers go numb, hauling canvas up or down, according to shouted orders that vanish almost as soon as they're spoken, swallowed by the wind. Lightning forks across the sky in jagged flashes, illuminating the scene in brief, blinding glimpses. Blackbeard standing tall at the helm, beard smoldering even in the rain. Men scrambling like ants along the rigging. Sails flapping like broken wings before they're hauled into place. Your arms burn from the effort, rope biting into your palms hard enough to draw blood. You can taste the salt on your lips, not just from the sea spray, but from sweat pouring down your face in sheets. And beneath all of it, there's the constant, bone-deep creak and groan of the ship itself, timbers flexing and protesting as waves slam against the hull again and again. The whole world seems to tilt and buck, and more than once you find yourself slipping, catching the rail at the last moment to avoid being thrown overboard into the churning black below. No one speaks unless they have to. There's no room for jokes or arguments now, just survival. Blackbeard's voice cuts through it all, deep and steady, giving orders with that unshakable calm that's somehow more terrifying than if he were shouting. You wonder briefly if he's ever afraid. Probably not. Or if he is, he hides it better than any man you've ever seen. Eventually, the storm passes slowly, as if reluctant to let go. The rain eases. The wind dies down. The sky lightens from black to gray to pale morning blue again, as though none of it ever happened. But the deck tells a different story. Ropes snapped, barrels overturned, blood stains near the rail where someone wasn't quick enough. There's always a cost. You scrape yourself upright, muscles sore from holding on so long, and look around. Some faces are missing. That's the way of things. A storm takes what it wants. No one says much about it. You wipe salt and rain from your eyes and get back to work, because that's the only choice there is. And then, just as suddenly, there are days where the sea is nothing but calm. Flat and still, with the sun beating down so fiercely, it feels like the deck itself might catch fire beneath your boots. You peel off your coat and roll up your sleeves, skin slick with sweat, shirt sticking to your back like a second skin. The air hangs heavy, still and silent, broken only by the creak of ropes and the occasional low murmur of a conversation too tired to rise above a whisper. Those hot days stretch even longer than the stormy ones. At least in a storm, there's something to do. But in this heat, there's only waiting, watching the horizon, hoping for wind. You pace the deck just to keep moving. boots thudding quietly against the boards, hands trailing along the rail as you scan for the faintest sign of a ship or storm cloud. You pass men slumped against barrels or stretched out under the shade of the sail, faces shiny with sweat, eyes half closed. No one has the energy for much. The rum gets passed around slower. Voices are hoarse from the dry air. And through it all, Blackbeard keeps pacing, unmoved by heat or boredom. Always watching, always moving. You wonder again how he does it. Maybe it's just habit. Or maybe he really is as inhuman as the legends claim. One well-known fact, Queen Anne's Revenge wasn't just any ship. It was a former French servant ship before Blackbeard captured and refitted it, turning it into the floating fortress it became. A grim legacy beneath the black flag. And here's a lesser-known quirk. Some crew claimed the ship was haunted, that on still days like this, you could hear footsteps below deck when no one was there. Echoes from the ship's darker past. And that lingering question always remains. How many days like this did Blackbeard endure? Pacing beneath the burning sun, waiting for the next prize, the next storm, the next fight. Did the waiting wear him down? Or was it all part of some endless plan only he could see? As the sun sinks lower toward the horizon, the deck cools slightly beneath your boots. A faint breeze picks up at last, stirring the sails like a sigh. And once again, the crew rises, slow, deliberate, ready to move, ready to work, ready to chase whatever comes next across this endless, unforgiving sea. When the lookout's cry finally rings down from the crow's nest, sails on the horizon. There's no sudden cheering, no wild excitement, no clashing of swords or stomping of boots, like some tavern ballad would have you believe. On Queen Anne's Revenge, the mood shifts in a quieter, colder way. A ripple of movement passes along the deck. Men straighten from where they've been sprawled. Pipes are tapped out against the rail. Quiet voices fall silent as all eyes turn toward the patch of sky where a speck of white canvas has appeared against the blue. You move with the others, steady and deliberate, checking your weapons. Pistol loaded, powder dry, blade sharp. Always check twice. You've seen what happens to men who don't. The barrel gets stuck, the flintlock misfires, the blade snaps in a moment that should have been easy. And there's no room for that kind of mistake here. The ship grows tense as Blackbeard steps forward. His boots thud slowly against the boards, the only real sound in the heavy air. His beard smolders, as always, thin trails of smoke rising around his face, half hidden beneath the wide brim of his hat. He doesn't shout. He doesn't have to. His presence alone is enough to push men into motion. You glance up at the rigging as sails are trimmed. The Queen Anne's Revenge adjusting her course with a slow, predatory grace. The merchant vessel ahead is smaller, maybe a brig or a sloop. It's hard to tell from this distance, but you can already tell one thing. She's not running yet. That means her captain either doesn't see you or doesn't believe what he sees. A black-sailed ship like this one doesn't exactly blend in. But some men convince themselves of impossible things when faced with fear. Maybe they think you're just passing through. Maybe they think they can negotiate. As the gap closes, the deck fills with quiet preparation. Powder is loaded into the cannons. Grappling hooks are stacked neatly, ropes coiled at the ready. There's no wild yelling, no songs about treasure or death. Just the careful work of men who've done this before. Too many times to count. You're handed a cutlass by one of the officers. The blade's not shiny. No pirate carries a polished weapon. It's dull, plain, worn from use. But it's sharp. That's what matters. The distance narrows. You can see figures on the deck of the merchant ship now, moving frantically. Sails shifting, ropes hauled in too fast. They've seen you for what you are, but by now, it's too late. Queen Anne's Revenge cuts through the water with her usual easy menace, closing the gap like a wolf pacing down its prey. Blackbeard raises a hand. No words, just that single motion. And suddenly, The silence breaks wide open. The cannons fire. The first volley isn't meant to sink her. It's meant to scare her. Chain shot whistles through the air, snapping across the merchant's rigging with a shriek of shredded canvas and splintering wood. You hear it even over the thunder of your own guns, the sharp, tearing sound as sails fall in tatters, leaving the merchant ship dead in the water. And then it's time to board. The real work begins. You grip the rope in both hands, boots slamming against the rail as you swing across. Water churns below. The air is thick with smoke and powder, sharp in your nose, biting in your lungs. Your feet hit the deck of the merchant ship hard, knees bending to absorb the shock. Around you, Blackbeard's crew lands one after another, silent, focused, efficient. It isn't like the stories tell it. There's no glory in it. No cinematic sword fights. Just shouting, grappling, pushing through terrified sailors who aren't soldiers and never wanted to be. One man swings a belaying pin at your head, and you duck, driving your shoulder into his gut to knock him down. The smell of sweat, blood, and smoke is everywhere now. Boots sliding across wet boards, blades flashing in quick, brutal arcs. You don't think much. You just move. Step forward, push aside, keep going until the deck is yours. When it's over, it ends as fast as it began. The merchant's crew drops their weapons, hands raised. Some drop to their knees. Others just stand frozen, eyes wide and hollow. You stand there, cutlass slick with sweat, not much else, and look around as the last of the smoke clears. The prize is yours, but it's not treasure chests and gleaming gold coins waiting below. It never is. One of the officers calls out inventory as you and the others begin the hard, repetitive work of hauling goods from below deck. Barrels of molasses, casks of tobacco, crates of cloth, salted fish, maybe a little silver if you're lucky. But rarely the kind of wealth men sing about. That's always the lie. The reality is barrels, crates, cargo lists scratched in chalk. It's valuable enough, but it won't change your life. Not unless you collect 100 ships like this one. And there's another truth you've learned along the way. Sometimes the real prize isn't the cargo. It's the ship itself. A fast merchant vessel can be turned pirate under the right captain, fitted with new guns and new flags. That's happened more than once. One well-known fact about Blackbeard. He wasn't just a pirate captain. He was a tactician. He'd blockade entire ports, capturing multiple ships at once, rather than chasing after single prizes. And here's a lesser-known quirk. He often let merchant crews go unharmed, as long as they didn't resist too hard. A practical man didn't need extra blood on his hands, just enough to keep fear alive. And that lingering question historians still argue. How many prizes like this did Blackbeard take in his lifetime? Records are patchy, and rumors outnumber facts by far. Once the loot is tallied and the prisoners secured, or simply set adrift in one of their own small boats, you make your way back to Queen Anne's Revenge. Another job done, another prize taken. But as you climb back over the rail, boots thudding back onto familiar boards, you know, there's no real celebration waiting. Just the same old deck, the same steady creak of wood underfoot, and Blackbeard's silhouette against the sky, pacing as ever, beard still smoldering in the quiet aftermath. When the last prize has been taken, the loot divided, and the sails set once more for open sea. Life aboard Queen Anne's Revenge doesn't grow easier. It simply settles into another kind of rhythm. Downtime, that strange stretch of hours or days between raids when there's no enemy on the horizon and no port in sight. It's a kind of limbo, too calm to feel like real work, too tense to feel like rest. You'd think with no ships to chase and no cannons to fire, things would soften. But on a pirate ship, boredom is just as dangerous as battle. You find yourself back at the same old chores. Coiling rope, patching sails, scrubbing the deck until the wood feels like it'll splinter under your hands. It's endless work, Salt eats away at everything. Ropes, wood, even the iron of your own blade. If you let it go for more than a day, things start falling apart faster than you can repair them. And so you scrub and stitch, pull and patch, moving through the long hot afternoons with sweat soaking through your shirt, the sun burning the back of your neck until it feels like leather. The deck feels quieter during these stretches. Men move slower. Conversations get sharper, more bitter. Little things become excuses for fights. A spilled cup of rum, a glance held too long, a word said in the wrong tone. You've seen it again and again. A fistfight breaking out over something that wouldn't matter on land, here on the deck, can turn into a full brawl in moments. That's when the officers step in, or worse, Blackbeard himself. Discipline aboard Queen Anne's Revenge is not gentle. There's no magistrate, no courtroom. Punishment comes quick and hard, and no one wants to be on the receiving end. You've seen men tied to the mast and flogged until their backs looked like raw meat, skin peeled away in bloody stripes. 20 lashes for stealing rum, 30 for drawing a blade on a fellow crewman. And for desertion, or the attempt of it, worse things still. You remember one morning clear as anything. A man named Holt, quiet most days, steady with rope and powder. You thought he had sense. But sense doesn't always hold when a man's been staring at the same horizon for weeks. Holt had tried to slip off the ship in the middle of a port stop, thinking he could disappear into the crowd with a few coins tucked under his shirt. Blackbeard had caught him before he ever left the docks. The punishment wasn't quick. It was made to be remembered. Holt spent 2 days tied to the mast, lashed and left there with only a cup of water passed to him at dawn and dusk. His face never showed much as they laid into him, not until the 3rd day, when they cut him down and let him collapse to the deck like a sack of wet cloth. He never tried it again, and no one else did either, for a long while after. It isn't all beatings and brawls, of course. There are quiet stretches too. Hours when the sea is calm, and the sky turns that deep, endless blue that feels like it could swallow you whole. You lean against the rail during those moments, arms folded, eyes half closed against the sun, listening to the creak of the rigging, the low murmur of men playing dice or cards in the shade of the mainmast. Sometimes someone pulls out a fiddle, not often, but when it happens, it cuts through the hot silence like a breeze. The music's rough, never polished, just scraps of old tunes from ports long past. But in those moments, the ship feels almost softer. Not kind, not safe, but bearable. You take out your blade on days like that, sitting cross-legged on the deck, oiling the steel until it gleams faintly in the sun. Always checking the edge, making sure there's no rust. It's not just for show. A sharp blade means life or death, and there's no sense letting it go dull. One well-known fact about Blackbeard: he had a strict code, contrary to the stories of pirates as wild men without rules. His Articles of Agreement laid out clear laws about theft, fighting, even the fair division of spoils. But here's a lesser-known quirk. Blackbeard was said to personally inspect the powder stores and weapons every few days. Not because he didn't trust his crew, but because he trusted no one more than himself. And there's always that lingering question. How much of Blackbeard's cruelty was real, and how much was calculated theater? Did he flog men because he enjoyed it, or because he knew it kept the rest in line? Historians argue both ways, but standing on this deck, watching the man move through the ranks with that slow, deliberate step, it's hard to say. The day drags on. The sun sinks lower. Shadows stretch long across the deck as the air finally cools. Men gather in small knots to gamble, tell stories, or simply sit in silence with their backs against the barrels. And through it all, the steady rhythm of the sea continues beneath your feet, the ship rolling gently as if it's breathing slow and steady. Discipline here is as constant as the tide. Harsh, yes, but fair in its own grim way. You either learn to live with it, or you don't last long. By nightfall, the deck grows quiet again. Lanterns swing from the rigging, casting pools of golden light onto the dark boards below. You find your usual spot on the rail, leaning back, eyes half closed, as the stars begin to emerge one by one overhead. Another day survived. Another day closer to what, exactly? Riches? Freedom? Or just the next fight, the next storm? For now, it's enough just to breathe in the salt air, feel the rough wood beneath your hands, and know you're still here. Still part of Blackbeard's crew, whether by choice, by luck, or by sheer stubbornness. When the sails finally shift toward land, and the outline of a port town rises up from the horizon, there's a flicker of something close to relief among the crew. Not joy, never that. Just a quiet kind of weariness, loosening its grip for a moment. Port means solid ground underfoot, fresh supplies, and maybe a night spent under a roof instead of open sky. But it means risk too, because men like you don't dock just any port. Pirate havens aren't marked on any official chart, but everyone knows where they are. Ragged towns clinging to the edges of islands, all salt-stained planks and leaning taverns. Crowded docks heavy with the smell of tar and unwashed sailors. Nassau, Tortuga, New Providence, names whispered like prayers among those living outside the law. It's not the cleanest life. But for men with prices on their heads, it's the only place that welcomes you without too many questions. The moment Queen Anne's Revenge drops anchor, the crew scatters down the gangplank in twos and threes. You follow, boots thudding on weathered boards, eyes scanning faces in the crowd out of habit. Merchants, fishermen, drifters, and bounty hunters. That's the thing about pirate ports. There's always someone looking to trade a man's neck for a purse of gold. You keep your pistol close and your voice low as you move through the narrow streets. The taverns here spill out onto the road, music and shouting mixing with the clatter of dice and the heavy scent of rum. Somewhere, someone's already singing an old sea shanty, half drunk before the sun's even set. But for all the noise, there's a watchfulness beneath it. Everyone keeps one eye on the door, one hand near their blade. You find your way to the supplies market first. Salted beef, powder, canvas for patching sails. Essentials. The coin weighs heavy in your pocket, but it never feels like enough. Blackbeard's officers handle the big deals. You just handle what's needed to keep the ship running. Still, there's time for a drink. And maybe a hand of cards. You slip into a tavern like dozens you've seen before. Dark wood, low beams, air thick with smoke. It's easy to blend in here. Easier still to forget, for a few hours, that there's a price on your head. One well-known fact. Blackbeard was so notorious that colonial governors offered huge bounties for his capture. Hundreds of pounds sterling. Enough to tempt even a friend into betrayal. But here's a lesser-known quirk. Blackbeard himself was known to pay informants in these ports, keeping eyes and ears on who might be hunting him in return for gold or safe passage. And that lingering question historians still ask. Did Blackbeard trust these pirate havens, or did he see them as just another battlefield? By nightfall, the crew regathers slowly along the docks. Quieter now, pockets a little lighter, heads a little foggier from drink. You pull your coat tight against the cooling air, pistol still close at your side, and glance once more over the town before boarding Queen Anne's Revenge again. Because in places like this, safety is always temporary, and there's always someone watching. As dawn breaks and the sails are raised once more, you feel the weight settle back onto your shoulders. Blackbeard's voice calls out orders. The ship creaks under your boots, and the sea stretches wide ahead. But this time, the horizon holds something different, a threat that's been building for weeks. Ships hunting your captain, governors sharpening their knives, and soon there won't be any port left to run to. Now, the story turns toward that final reckoning, toward the narrow waters off Ocracoke, where Blackbeard's legend will face its end. Morning comes pale and quiet as Queen Anne's. Revenge rocks gently in the calm waters near Ocracoke Inlet. There's no wind stirring the sails yet. No gulls crying overhead. Just that stillness. A strange, heavy silence that settles over the deck like damp wool. You wake to it slow, pushing yourself up from the boards where you slept, shoulders stiff from too many nights without a real bed. But there's something different in the air this time. A kind of waiting. The sun rises red and low over the line of trees on shore, painting the sky in streaks of soft peach and violet that feel too peaceful, too serene for what's likely to come. You sit with your back against the base of the mainmast for a moment longer than usual, rubbing sleep from your eyes with the edge of a calloused hand, watching that bright line of sun pull slowly over the water. The day is already warm, the humidity clinging to your skin like a second shirt, the kind of heat that makes everything feel slower, even time itself. You can feel the tension building in the silence around you. It's in the way men move, quieter, more focused, the way they glance toward the horizon, and then away again. There's no chatter this morning, no dice clattering against barrels or songs drifting up from the deck. Even the usual morning arguments have gone still. No one dares tempt fate by pretending this is just another sunrise. The rumors have been circling for days. Governor Spotswood of Virginia has finally had enough. Enough bribes, enough stolen ships, enough bold pirates slipping in and out of the Carolinas as if the Royal Navy were no more than a suggestion. You've heard it muttered in dark corners of taverns, and whispered between men as they patched sails or scrubbed powder stains off the cannons. They're coming. Real men. Real ships. And not the kind that flees at the sight of your black flag. You tighten your belt. Adjust your sash. Your pistol sits snug at your side. Powder horn sealed, primed and dry. Your cutlass you've already sharpened twice this morning, just for something to do with your hands. It gleams faintly in the rising light, the curve of the blade catching the early sun. Near the stern, Blackbeard stands like a statue carved from shadow and smoke. His wide-brimmed hat casts a heavy shade across his eyes, but the glow of the match cords woven into his beard give his whole face an eerie flicker. No man alive looks more at home on the eve of battle than he does. Calm, watchful, broad-shouldered, and still as the sea before a storm. Some say he's never feared a fight. Others claim he simply learned how to wear his fear like armor, turning it into something others could see, but never touch. Whatever the truth, no one questions him now. Not when the breeze finally shifts. And a new sound comes with it, the faint creak of masts on the water. Sails. You step toward the rail, boots thudding softly against the deck. Eyes narrowing against the growing light, you spot the silhouettes just beyond the inlet's curve. Two sloops. Small, sleek, fast. They cut across the calm water with clean precision, flags snapping above them. Not merchant ships. These are Royal Navy, or close enough. Privateers under Spotswood's command, carrying cannons and muskets, and men trained to kill pirates like you. Blackbeard doesn't raise his voice. He simply turns toward his men and gives the order. Prepare to fight. And so, the quiet bustle begins. Cannons double-checked. Powder measured and poured. Pistols laid out in rows like playing cards, each one loaded, primed, and placed with care. The men move with that peculiar blend of speed and silence that comes from repetition and dread. You know this rhythm. You've felt it before. Even now, part of you wonders if they'll try to parley. Maybe send a boat over with terms. But deep down, you already know they won't. Not this time. There's too much money on Blackbeard's head. Too much pressure from above. Someone wants a spectacle. A statement. And that means blood. One well-known fact. Blackbeard's final days weren't spent chasing treasure, but anchoring quietly along the Carolina coast. Rumored to be seeking a pardon and a quieter life. But here's a lesser-known truth. In the days before this battle, He reportedly entertained guests aboard his ship, drinking and joking as if nothing waited just beyond the trees. Some say it was arrogance. Others say it was resignation. And the question that still lingers, centuries later, did he know this would be his end? Did he choose Ocracoke Inlet because he thought he could escape? Or because he was done running? The sun climbs higher. The morning haze begins to burn off, and the two sloops draw nearer. No sign of slowing. No signal for peace. Just steady, deliberate approach. You take your place at the rail, hands resting lightly on the hilt of your blade. Around you, the deck is quiet once more. Not from fear, though there is plenty of that, but from readiness. Every man knows what comes next. You breathe deep, tasting salt and smoke and something metallic beneath it all. The calm before the storm. The final inhale before the match is lit. And this time, the match belongs to them. By the time the sun climbs higher into its late morning arc, there is no doubt left aboard Queen Anne's Revenge. The British sloops are no longer a rumor whispered in dark corners, nor a shape guested against the hazy horizon. They are real, two lean ships cutting steadily toward you through the calm waters of Ocracoke Inlet, their sails bright and sharp against the blue. There's no mistaking them for merchants. Their rigging is too neat, their hulls too clean, their intent written plain in the way they move. Deliberate, coordinated, patient as wolves closing in on cornered prey. The air aboard Queen Anne's Revenge feels heavier now, not with heat alone, though the sun bears down relentless, painting every wooden surface with a searing glare, but with the weight of waiting. You stand near the portside rail, pistol already primed, cutlass strapped at your hip, watching as the sloops approach. Around you, the rest of the crew moves in that same quiet, tightly wound rhythm that always comes just before a fight. There is no shouting, no running, no hurried last-minute repairs. Every man knows what to do, and every man knows what's coming. Blackbeard walks the deck, his boots striking slow and steady against the boards. His wide coat flaps faintly in the rising breeze, black against the brightness all around. The smoldering fuses twisted into his beard send up thin threads of smoke, curling in the sunlight like signals to some waiting force beyond sight. His gaze is steady, moving from man to man as he passes. He says nothing, but he doesn't have to. Each of you meets that glance in turn, understanding without words that this is not like boarding some merchant brig. This is the fight they've been hunting for. A reckoning. The British ships draw closer still. You can see them clearly now. Not just the shape of their hulls, but the men on their decks. Figures in navy coats trimmed with white, muskets resting on the rails, sabers gleaming at their sides. You catch the glint of a spyglass raised by one of their officers, probably watching Queen Anne's Revenge as carefully as you watch them. The two sloops split their approach now. One angles toward the starboard side, the other holding steady off the port. A pincer movement. Classic. Smart. No easy escape. You feel the deck shift beneath your boots as Blackbeard's men adjust sail trim, working without needing to be told. There's no attempt to run. That would be pointless now. The inlet doesn't offer enough open water for it. And besides, Blackbeard doesn't run. One of the officers passes near you, checking powder and supplies along the rail. You hear him murmur orders in a low voice to the men beside him. Keep the cannons loaded, but don't waste a shot until they're close. Powder's precious now. You nod silently, fingers brushing the hilt of your blade again, eyes flicking back to the ships closing in. One well-known fact. It was Lieutenant Robert Maynard commanding one of those British sloops, sent directly by Governor Spotswood. But here's a lesser-known detail. Maynard's crew wasn't made up of hardened soldiers. Many of them were pressed men, regular sailors conscripted for this task. Men not eager, perhaps, but ordered into it all the same. And yet they sailed toward you now, muskets at the ready, cannons loaded, faces tight with tension. You can almost feel even across the water. The officers aboard Queen Anne's Revenge move methodically. Cannons are checked, tamped, and primed. Ropes are coiled and ready for grappling. Pistols laid out in rows on barrel tops, flintlocks set in perfect order. There's a quiet focus to it all that feels almost like prayer. Not fear exactly, but reverence for what comes next. You catch the scent of powder on the air as one of the gunners tests a slow-burning match, ensuring the line of flame holds steady. The smell is sharp and familiar, part of the ship's constant atmosphere by now. Along with it comes the creak of rigging and the faint slap of water against the hull. Even the sea seems to hold its breath. As the sloops close in, you find yourself studying their details with unnecessary focus, counting the gun ports along their sides, noting the colors stitched into their flags. Little things to keep your mind steady while the knot in your stomach draws tighter. It isn't fear exactly, but something heavier. The knowledge that once the first shot is fired, there's no turning back. And still, Blackbeard remains calm. He stands with one hand resting on the hilt of his sword, eyes fixed on the incoming threat, as though he's merely judging the weather, not weighing life and death. You wonder, as you always do, if he feels anything in these moments. If his heart ever races, if his breath ever catches. Or if he's truly become something else, half legend, half man, entirely beyond the reach of ordinary nerves. One officer near you says quietly, "Stand ready." The words ripple outward in a wave, passed from man to man like a signal. You check your pistol again, thumb brushing the primed flint. You know you'll only get one good shot before switching to steel. Closer now. The sloops are within shouting distance. You can see individual faces clearly. Young men, some wide-eyed, others set like stone. You imagine the same must be true from their side. Pirates lined up in rows, blades drawn, pistols leveled, Blackbeard looming larger than life in their spyglasses. The British sloops don't slow. They keep their pace steady, sails full, hulls cutting a clean line through the sun-dappled water. There's no sign of a parley flag, no white cloth raised in offering. Whatever terms might have existed between pirates and governors before, they're burned away now. This is about making a statement, about putting an end to a legend. The tension aboard Queen Anne's Revenge sharpens into something like stillness, but harder, like stretched rope just before it snaps. The world feels quieter. The creak of rigging, the flap of sailcloth, even the calls of gulls on shore seem muted beneath the weight of waiting. Blackbeard's voice breaks it. Steady. Just that one word. Steady. No speech, no flourish. The moment is enough on its own. You set your boots a little wider on the deck, grip firm on your pistol. Around you, men do the same. A line of silent figures braced and ready. The sloops come within cannon range. And now, at last, the waiting is over. When the first shots finally crack through the heavy air, it is not the grand, slow buildup you might expect from the songs sailors sing in port taverns. There is no dramatic pause before it begins, no wind-whipped silence broken by a single cannon as some signal. It happens fast, a sudden roar of iron and fire as Queen Anne's Revenge looses her first broadside, the sound punching through the quiet inlet like a thunderclap that rattles both the rigging and the bones inside your chest. You feel it more than hear it, the vibration running up through the deck beneath your boots, the hot sting of powder smoke rushing past your face, sharp as ash caught in the wind. The first volley finds its mark. You see it as the cannonball slams into the starboard side of one of the British sloops. There is a splintering crash of wood breaking apart, planks exploding outward in a fan of jagged debris. Men on the enemy deck stagger back from the impact, some ducking instinctively, others already raising their muskets in reply. But the sloop doesn't falter. If anything, it drives forward faster now, sails full and lines taut, as it presses toward Queen Anne's Revenge like a predator sensing wounded prey. Before the echo of that first shot has fully rolled away, the British answer. Their cannons bark back, smaller but quick, sending iron slugs whistling through the air. One crashes into the railing, just a few feet to your left. The wooden rail buckles inward with a violent crack, shards of splinters flying up like arrows. You duck without thinking, heart hammering against your ribs, smoke stinging your eyes and throat. But there's no time to freeze. Already, the deck is moving around you in practiced rhythm. Men shouting, but not in panic. These are orders, clear and quick. Powder here. Load again. Hold steady. Powder boys dart between the cannons like shadows, hauling iron balls in thick leather gloves, ramrods flashing up and down as the crews reload as fast as humanly possible. The ship tilts slightly underfoot as Queen Anne's Revenge leans into her turn, rigging straining against the wind. You brace yourself, boots scraping over powder-slicked boards, fingers tightening on the grip of your pistol. Another cannon roars. This time, the shot shreds through the rigging of the nearest sloop, snapping ropes and sending canvas whipping loose like a wounded wing. The British men aboard it scramble to pull the sails back under control, but their formation doesn't break. You can hear their officers shouting, even over the crack and roar of the guns. They are not green hands. These men have faced worse before, or at least they believe they have. The smoke is everywhere now, thick and choking. You can barely see more than a few yards ahead. The sea, once bright blue and glittering, is hidden behind a swirling gray curtain that burns the eyes and leaves everything tasting of metal and ash. You reload your pistol in this fog, fingers moving by muscle memory. Powder first, then ball. Tamp it down hard. Prime the flintlock. Snap it shut with a sharp click. You raise the weapon through the haze, sighting along the barrel. For a heartbeat, you catch sight of a figure aboard the British sloop. A man in navy blue, moving between stations, musket slung across his shoulder. You pull the trigger. The shot cracks out, joining the din already rolling across the inlet. Whether it finds its mark or not, you do not wait to see. Another shot will be needed soon enough. Blackbeard moves past you then. His silhouette is unmistakable, even through the smoke. Tall, broad-shouldered, coat flapping behind him, like a banner caught in the wind. The slow-burning fuses woven into his beard send up steady streams of smoke, making him seem part of the fog itself, half man, half phantom. His eyes scan the chaos with that same calm you've seen 100 times before, as if this is nothing more than a rough storm to be weathered. Starboard guns again. His voice cuts through the confusion, deep and steady. It does not waver. It never has. You fire again, the barrel of your pistol already hot in your hand, knuckles white as you brace yourself against the recoil. Beside you, another man shouts as he reloads his own weapon, sweat running down his face in muddy rivers. The deck rocks beneath you, more sharply now, as another British shot slams into the side of Queen Anne's Revenge. The impact sends men staggering. One sailor near you drops to his knees, clutching his ribs, blood staining his shirt in slow, spreading patches. But no one breaks rank. One well-known fact. Blackbeard entered this fight outnumbered. Queen Anne's Revenge had fewer men and fewer guns than the British sloops bearing down on her. But here is a lesser-known detail. Even under those odds, his crew kept firing in perfect rhythm, wasting no shot, every man drilled to his task until the very end. It wasn't glory. It wasn't romance. It was hard discipline, earned through months at sea. And the open question history never settles. Did Blackbeard believe he could win this battle? Or did he know from the first shot that this was nothing but his last stand? A fight waged not for survival, but for memory, to ensure no one would forget his name long after he was gone? The two sloops circle closer now. You can see the faces of the British sailors through gaps in the smoke. Young men, many of them, mouths drawn tight with fear or focus. Their cannons flash again, the boom rolling over the water like the world itself tearing in half. You feel the deck shudder beneath your boots. Powder smoke wraps around you like a second sky. The sky overhead has turned pale and strange, shot through with yellow light filtering through the haze. Your pistol is empty again. You toss it aside, drawing your cutlass instead, the blade catching what little light still filters down through the smoke. The first shots have been fired, but the real fight, the close, bitter grappling, blade against blade, is still ahead. You can feel it coming, as surely as you feel the beat of your own heart. The air is split with gunfire. Men are shouting now not just orders, but warnings and curses. And Queen Anne's revenge, battered though she may be, holds her ground beneath your boots like a living thing refusing to die. There is a moment, always, that sits right between cannon fire and blades drawn, quieter than you'd expect. A brief, sharp breath held by every man aboard Queen Anne's Revenge. Smoke still hangs heavy across the deck, thicker than any morning fog, but through it, shapes move. Figures flickering in and out of view like shadows given form. And then, all at once, the range closes. The British sloops come in hard and fast, grappling lines thrown, iron hooks biting into the rail. You feel the jolt as the ships smash against each other. Wood scraping wood, a sound like two giants grinding teeth. The deck lurches beneath you, and instinct kicks in. Cutlass in hand now, your pistol long since fired and discarded. You push forward toward the rail, where the first of the British boarders are already coming over. There's no more careful aiming, no more precision shots across open water. This is blade work now, close, raw, brutal. The kind of fight where a man's breath comes in quick, panicked bursts, and the world shrinks down to the weight of steel in your hand and the press of bodies all around. A British sailor lunges at you first, young, barely out of boyhood, his face pale beneath his tricorn, saber swinging wild. You step to the side, boots scraping across blood-slicked boards, and your cutlass comes up fast, steel meeting steel with a shriek that sets your teeth on edge. Sparks jump from the blades. You shove back hard, enough to send him staggering. Someone else crashes into him from behind. Pirate or Navy, you can't tell, and he disappears into the smoke and shouting. Everywhere around you, the same chaos unfolds. Men grappling hand to hand, pistols fired at arm's length, the loud crack lost beneath the sharper sound of blades meeting blades. You see a figure collapse near the mast, cut down mid-charge, his cutlass clattering across the deck before it's kicked aside. The heat is overwhelming now. Between the fire from the cannon decks below and the sheer press of bodies, the air feels thick enough to choke on. Sweat and powder smoke mix with something darker, the copper tongue of blood rising on the wind. Your shirt sticks to your back. Your grip on the hilt of your cutlass slickens with it, but you don't dare loosen it for even a moment. Blackbeard himself moves through the fight like a force of nature. You catch glimpses of him between the press of men. Tall, wide-shouldered, his coat dark as storm clouds. Beard still smoldering with slow-burning fuses that curl smoke around his face like some living spirit out of legend. His blade flashes in the dim light, rising and falling with the same steady rhythm you've seen him use when pacing the deck. No rush, no waste. Each stroke measured, deliberate. Men fall around him. British sailors cut down as they rush forward. You can hear their officers calling out, voices strained now. Not just barking orders, but something closer to desperation. One well-known fact. In his final fight, Blackbeard was said to have been shot multiple times and cut in a dozen places before he finally fell. But here's the lesser-known quirk. His crew fought just as fiercely, refusing to surrender even when outnumbered. Some historians suggest they fought on instinct alone by the end, not for victory, but because they had no other way left to live. You push forward again, cutlass raised, parrying another blow aimed low at your ribs. The shock of impact runs up your arm, teeth gritting against it. You twist, blade sliding along the other man's, and slam your elbow into his face, sending him staggering back. No time to celebrate. Another follows behind him, blade raised high. There is no pause, no space to breathe. The deck tilts again underfoot. You glance past the rail and see water churning between the two hulls, frothing white where they grind against each other. The tide has turned red in places. Another officer, one of Blackbeard's, charges past you, rallying men toward the aft deck. You hear his voice cutting through the din. Hold the line. Hold the line. And you do. You hold the line, boot braced against broken planks, shoulder to shoulder with men you've shared storms and raids and endless days of salt and sun with. You catch sight of the British lieutenant, Maynard himself, maybe, near the other sloop's helm. Sword raised, coat stained dark with powder and blood. His face is grim, hard, focused. And you wonder, in some distant part of your mind, if he's thinking the same thing as you right now. How long can this possibly last? The answer, as always, is longer than it should. Steel scrapes against steel. Boots slide across decks, made slick with more than just seawater. The rigging overhead sways and creaks as men climb and fall and climb again. Somewhere behind you, a fire has caught. Powder smoke rising thicker now, edged with the sharper sting of burning canvas. And through it all, Blackbeard keeps fighting. You see him again now, not 10 feet away, locked blade to blade with a British officer. Their swords clash once, twice, 3 times in quick succession. The officer's blade flickers in, fast as a striking snake, but Blackbeard's arm moves faster. His cutlass drives forward, and the officer crumples like a dropped sail. That's the shape of it now, not neat rows of men, not lines of muskets fired in unison, just knots of fighters, tangled and messy and desperate. You swing again, block again. Feel your breath burning in your chest as the inlet air thickens and darkens and shrinks down to nothing but this. One final thought cuts through the haze. If this is how it ends, at least it will not end quietly. You don't see the exact moment Blackbeard falls. Not immediately, not in some clear flash of finality. What you notice first is the subtle shift in the air, the way the rhythm of the fight around you stutters, like a tide pulling back unexpectedly. One moment, there's the steady grind of close-quarters combat. Boots thudding on blood-slit planks, blades clashing in frantic bursts. The sharp ring of steel on steel, and the hoarse shouts of men too focused on survival to spare a thought for anything else. The next, there's something quieter beneath it all. A hesitation that runs through the crew, like a cold wind cutting through smoke. You've been holding your ground near the quarterdeck, cutlass arm burning from constant motion. Your shoulder throbs from a glancing cut taken earlier, blood seeping down your sleeve, but the pain barely registers. At some point during the fight, your shirt tore open along the seam, and the salt air stings against raw skin with every move. None of it matters. What matters is what you see now, through the smoke and flickering cannon fire haze, as your eyes catch on a figure standing where the helm meets the deck. Blackbeard, still upright, still moving, but not quite as tall, not quite as steady as you've seen him 100 times before. His silhouette remains unmistakable, broad-shouldered, coat dark as storm clouds, beard sending up thin tendrils of smoke from the burning fuses woven into it. But there's blood streaking down the front of that coat now. Dark, thick stripes, like new seams stitched by an unseen hand. You push forward instinctively, shoving past men tangled in knots of fighting. Shoulders slam against yours. Elbows catch at your ribs. One man nearly knocks you down, his back arched as he grapples with a British sailor, trying to wrestle his blade away. You duck under them, boots skidding across the boards, slicked with powder, salt spray, and darker stains. By the time you clear the crush of bodies and reach the steps leading up to the quarterdeck, the scene ahead is clearer. Blackbeard is locked in with two men, British officers judging by their uniforms. Their coats are torn and stained, hats long lost to the fight, faces grim and focused, both move in concert, blades flashing like bright teeth in the smoky air. Blackbeard meets them stroke for stroke, his cutlass rising and falling, with that same deliberate rhythm you've watched for months. Heavy, controlled, without waste. But there's no denying it now. His movements are slowing. His shoulders roll forward slightly with each blow, his steps dragging just a fraction too long. You pause on the steps, chest heaving as you catch your breath. It feels like time has narrowed to this single moment, this single point of balance where everything could still tip either way. Then, in the next heartbeat, it happens. The second officer, dark-haired, taller than the first, draws a pistol from his belt with one hand while still holding his sword in the other. A quick, practiced motion. You see the flash of silver as the barrel rises. Blackbeard is too focused on the other man to notice. There's a crack, a sharp burst of sound, louder than all the cannon fire combined because of what it means. The pistol shot takes Blackbeard low, near the ribs. He staggers, not falling, not yet, but the impact shudders through him visibly. His shoulders rock back, head tilting just slightly, as if considering the blow rather than reacting to it. And then, impossibly, he keeps moving. His sword arcs again, this time catching the first officer's blade and driving it down hard enough to send the man stumbling back. Blackbeard steps forward on sheer will, cutlass rising, his face a mask of dark smoke and blood. But the second officer is ready. His own blade flickers in low, thrusting beneath Blackbeard's outstretched arm, driving in deep. You see the steel punch into Blackbeard's side, just beneath the ribs, and this time there's no ignoring it. He stops moving. For a moment, no more than 2 breaths, he stands there like a statue carved from salt-streaked oak. Cutlass raised, back straight, head tilted slightly to one side, as if he's listening for something distant. The smoke from his beard still curls upward, mixing with the battle fog until you can't quite tell where the man ends and the legend begins. And then, slowly, Blackbeard drops to one knee. His sword slips from his hand with a heavy clatter that echoes across the deck, sharper than any cannon. The silence that follows is not complete, not yet, but it feels heavier somehow, like the sea itself is holding its breath. One well-known fact that's traveled through every port and tavern. Blackbeard was said to have taken 5 pistol shots and more than 20 sword wounds before he finally fell. And here's the lesser-known quirk. No man ever claimed to hear him cry out in those final moments. No scream, no curse, no last boast. Just silence. You push up the last few steps, boots slipping in a smear of blood, and reach the edge of the quarterdeck just as Blackbeard pitches forward. Not fast. Not like a man collapsing from a sudden strike. It's slower than that. He tilts forward as if bowing to some unseen figure, one knee still braced beneath him until even that strength is out. His body hits the deck with a dull, final thud, his coat spreading out around him like a shadow stretching toward the rail. The fighting doesn't stop immediately. For a few minutes more, it continues in pockets across the deck. Some men too lost in the fury of it to notice what's changed. Others refusing to believe it. But you feel it. Feel it in the way your own blade lowers slightly, in the way men around you glance toward the helm instead of their opponents. The weight pressing down on every shoulder as the truth spreads. Blackbeard is down. The British press harder now, sensing the shift. Their officers' voices rise above the clamor. Push them back. Take the deck. You swing your cutlass once more out of sheer reflex, parrying a blade aimed at your side. But your heart isn't in it the same way. Not anymore. The center is gone. By the time the last musket cracks, Queen Anne's Revenge still floats, sails torn and rigging sagging, decks scorched and bloodstained. But her captain does not rise. And so that lingering question historians always circle back to lingers with you now too. Did Blackbeard know this would be the end? Did he choose Ocracoke Inlet because he believed he could fight free? Or because he was ready to stop running? You step forward slowly now, past fallen men, past broken cannon wheels and ropes draped across the planks like abandoned lines. You reach the spot where Blackbeard lies. His face is half hidden by the fall of his coat collar, beard still faintly smoldering in the morning breeze. It doesn't feel like a victory. Not for the British, not for you, not for anyone, just an ending. The smoke takes a long time to clear, longer than you would have thought. Even after the shouting fades and the last blade is lowered, it hangs heavy over Queen Anne's revenge, thick ribbons of gray drifting across the deck like slow-moving ghosts. You stand there, cutlass lowered to your side, boots sticky with drying blood and salt spray, watching as the shape of the British sloops drifts clearer through the haze. They're still out there, sails torn but upright, anchors dropped now that the fight is done. It's quiet aboard the ship. Not silent, not completely. You can hear the creak of the rigging overhead, the faint slap of waves against the hull, the occasional cough from a wounded man hunched against the mast, or the low murmur of British officers giving orders to their crew as they begin to secure Queen Anne's revenge. But compared to the noise of battle a few minutes ago, it feels almost hollow. The men who fought alongside you stand in small knots. Cutlasses still in hand, faces dark with soot and sweat and something heavier than either. No one speaks much. There's nothing left to say. Blackbeard lies still on the quarterdeck, exactly where he fell. Two British officers stand near him now, one with a notebook in hand, writing something down. Taking inventory, maybe. Writing the story before it's even finished unfolding. You glance toward the rail where the grappling lines still hang. Some have already been cut free, drifting in the water like strands of seaweed. Others are hauled tight, keeping the two ships lashed together. There's no more cannon fire, no more shots. Just the slow, steady work of claiming what's left. An officer in a blue coat steps past you, boots thudding against the deck. His face is pale beneath the brim of his hat, eyes sunken with exhaustion and something like disbelief. He doesn't look at you directly, but as he passes, he calls out in a clipped voice, "Drop your weapons." For a moment, no one moves. It hangs there in the air, the last order. But one by one, cutlasses clatter to the boards. Pistols are set down, barrels still warm. You let your own blade drop as well, the weight of it leaving your hands strange and light all of a sudden. Like part of you has been left behind with it. The British move among the crew, gathering weapons, checking for wounded. Some of your fellows get hauled aside roughly, searched for hidden knives or pistols tucked into boots. But there's no wild brutality. Not yet. The work is slow, methodical, as if even the victors don't quite know what to make of what they've done. One well-known fact. After Blackbeard's death, Lieutenant Maynard's men cut off his head and hung it from the bowsprit as proof for Governor Spotswood. But here's a lesser-known quirk. Before they did that, they spent hours securing the ship, searching every inch for hidden weapons, secret stores of powder or treasure. It wasn't enough to win. They had to be certain. And there's always the lingering question historians still ask. What were Blackbeard's final words? Some say he said nothing. Others claim he whispered something only Maynard could hear. No record agrees. You find yourself near the mainmast, hands resting on the rail as you watch the British finish their work. Your arms ache. Your legs feel like wood. The sweat on your back has dried to salt. And yet, you can't quite bring yourself to sit down. Not yet. A few of the surviving crew have already been herded toward the British sloops, lined up along the deck like captured cargo, wrists tied, faces turned downward. You know you'll join them soon enough. Prisoners now. The pirates' life over. at least for those who lived through this day. But before that, you let yourself look back once more toward the quarterdeck. The British officers stand there still, murmuring to each other in low voices. One of them leans down to Blackbeard's body, checking something, perhaps to confirm he's really dead. As if the stillness alone wasn't enough. As if a man like that could only be counted truly gone after being touched, measured, weighed. The sun is higher now, burning away the last of the morning mist. The water around the ship gleams gold and silver, as calm as it was before the battle ever began. It feels like a trick, like the inlet itself refuses to remember what just happened. When they finally call for you to step forward, hands behind your back, weapons left behind, you do as you're told. Slow steps across the deck, boots scuffing against wood, worn down by months of storms and blood, and quiet moments that now feel impossibly distant. One of the British sailors knots a length of rope around your wrists. Not cruelly, not gently, just businesslike. You glance sideways at the man as he does it, and for a moment, your eyes meet. He looks as tired as you feel, and that's how it ends. Not with a shout, not with a final charge, but with ropes tied tight and quiet footsteps across the deck, as Queen Anne's Revenge is claimed and stripped down, her black flag lowered for the last time. The world doesn't feel different as you're led aboard the British sloop, but it is. Whatever came before is finished now, and what comes next is something else entirely. As the ship begins to pull away from the inlet, carrying you and the others toward a fate no one can yet name, your eyes drift back once more toward Queen Anne's Revenge, standing silent, battered, but still afloat beneath the hot Carolina sun. And so we turn now toward the next chapter in Blackbeard's story. Not in blood and battle this time, but in the quiet depths beneath the waves, where his ship, Queen Anne's Revenge, would vanish into legend. The hunt for her lost remains begins next. The sea holds its silence longer than men do. Years have passed since Blackbeard's last stand, yet his legend still lingers along the Carolina coast, like a haze that refuses to lift. You feel it most clearly standing beside the docks at Beaufort Inlet. Morning light stretches across still waters, rippling in thin sheets of gold, and though modern sailboats drift quietly between markers and channels, there's always that weight beneath it. Somewhere out there lies Queen Anne's Revenge. That's the thought carried by generations since Blackbeard's death. Whispers in taverns, legends passed from father to son, fishermen claiming their nets snag on something ancient beneath the waves. The idea that somewhere, not far from where tourists now stroll, Blackbeard's ship waits beneath layers of sand and salt, half hidden and half forgotten. It isn't treasure they talk about, not really. It's the ship itself, the proof. You lean on a wooden railing overlooking the harbor, boots creaking against planks that feel too clean, too smooth, compared to the rough boards of a pirate vessel. Modern boats bob gently in their slips, white fiberglass hulls, aluminum masts clinking gently in the morning breeze, fishing charters loading coolers and bait, families stepping aboard for a day of quiet sailing. It's peaceful, sure, but you can't help imagining Queen Anne's Revenge somewhere just beyond the curve of the marsh, hidden beneath centuries of sand and tide. The official search for Blackbeard's flagship didn't begin in earnest until the late 20th century. Before that, it was just story and rumor. A shipwreck found here, a cannon dragged up by accident there. Locals told of shallow reefs littered with anchors and wooden beams, too old to match any recorded vessel. Old maps surfaced now and then, faded ink lines marking X's in places that could have meant anything or nothing. But there was never solid proof. Not until the divers came. Proper salvage teams arrived in the 1990s, bringing sonar equipment, underwater mapping tools, and patience measured not in days but in years. You picture them as you stand here now. Men and women boarding small research boats, faces shaded by wide-brimmed hats, blueprints tucked under arms, radios crackling with coordinates. They weren't looking for treasure chests. They were looking for history. One well-known fact: Queen Anne's Revenge was originally a French servant ship named La Concorde, before Blackbeard captured her and refitted her for piracy. But here's the lesser-known quirk. When Blackbeard converted her, he left many of her original fittings in place. Certain beams, storage compartments, metal brackets meant to secure heavy chains. Clues buried beneath the outer trappings of a pirate ship, hidden like bones beneath flesh. Historians now believe those lingering French details helped the search teams confirm what they'd found when they finally saw it: familiar shapes that spoke of both Blackbeard's past and his pragmatism. And always that lingering question: did Blackbeard sink her on purpose? Some say he ran her aground as part of a blockade. Others that he scuttled her to cover his escape, hiding treasure aboard that's never been recovered. The idea of deliberate loss versus simple accident still divides scholars to this day. You step aboard one of the modern research vessels moored at the dock, a low-slung craft painted in dull blue and white, built less for speed and for steady work on calm waters. Coils of rope sit neatly on deck. Dive gear is stowed in bins along the rail. Inside the cabin, maps are laid out in careful rows, marked with pencil lines and GPS coordinates. The divers move with quiet efficiency, voices low as they check equipment. Wetsuits are laid across benches, regulators checked and rechecked. It's not the hurried scramble of battle. It's a kind of ritual now, slow, steady, deliberate. You watch them as they work, their hands moving with practiced ease, each knowing exactly what comes next. The boat pushes off from the dock just after sunrise, engine humming beneath your feet, smooth and quiet. The coastline slips away behind you, rows of pale houses with wide porches, saltgrass waving in the wind, the occasional lone figure walking the beach. Ahead stretches the inlet, shallow water broken by sandbars and channels, the same patterns that once made this the perfect place for pirates to hide. It isn't long before you reach the dive site, just a few miles offshore, marked by buoys set by earlier survey teams. From above, the water looks calm and empty, no hint of wreckage visible to the untrained eye. But beneath, history sleeps. The divers suit up, pulling zippers tight, slipping tanks over shoulders. Fins clack against the deck as they shuffle toward the rail. There's no fanfare, no speeches, just the quiet clink of metal on metal as masks are lowered into place. One by one, they slip into the water. Up top, everything slows. The boat rocks gently. The sky above grows steadily brighter. Clouds streak gold and pink as the sun rises higher. You stand by the rail, watching ripples spread where the divers vanished below, feeling the same stillness that must have settled over these waters long before any salvage team came looking. Underneath, it's another world entirely. Divers describe it like walking through shadows, muted green light, sand drifting in slow motion with each current. Visibility shifts from day to day, sometimes clear enough to see 20 feet ahead, sometimes murky as tea. But when conditions are right, the shapes emerge. Beams blackened by salt, iron cannons lying like sleeping giants, half buried in silt. Stretches of hull planks warped and broken, but still unmistakably shaped by human hands. The wreck stretches longer than most merchant ships from the era, close to 100 feet. Not much by modern standards, but vast for her time. The discovery was first confirmed not by gold or jewels, but by cannonballs. Divers brought up round iron shot, stamped with markings consistent with early 18th century French manufacture. Then came anchors, enormous and unwieldy, too large for smaller ships. And finally, artifacts smaller and stranger. Surgical tools, pewter plates, a bronze bell marked with a date matching Queen Anne's Revenge's lost history. It wasn't until months later that larger pieces of the ship were recovered. Sections of timber, entire assemblies of rigging hardware, frozen in salt and corrosion. all of it had to be treated carefully, soaked in chemical baths to halt decay. Each item cataloged and stored, not in treasure chests, but in climate-controlled museum rooms lined with quiet reverence. You imagine standing in those rooms now, long white halls filled with glass cases, each holding a single object, a rusted blade, a chipped ceramic jug, the brass fitting from a cannon, and each piece whispering its own part of the story. One diver once described it like this: "It's not finding gold, it's finding fingerprints. Small touches of real people who lived and worked aboard that long-vanished ship. That's what draws teams back again and again. Not the hope of sudden riches, but the slow, deliberate act of pulling the past into the light. And here's the quieter truth few tourists ever hear. Even after years of work, large parts of Queen Anne's Revenge still rest beneath the waves. Preservation is a balancing act. Leave too much down there, and it might be lost forever. Bring up too much too fast, and what's saved on the surface begins to crumble. As the divers surface again, pulling themselves up the ladder one by one, you see it in their faces. That quiet satisfaction, not triumph, exactly, but steady progress. The sun is higher now, glittering off the water in wide sheets. The engine hums to life again as the boat turns slowly back toward shore. But even as the coastline draws near, your mind lingers on what's still waiting beneath the waves. Not just cannons and timbers, but the lingering echo of a man and his ship. Blackbeard's story didn't end in a single battle. It sank into the depths, waiting for hands and eyes patient enough to bring it back. There's a particular quiet that settles over you the moment you slip beneath the waves. The surface disappears above your head in a shimmer of fractured light, replaced by green-blue shadows that press in close and cool against your skin. It's not like walking through air. It's slower, heavier. Every movement is deliberate. And as you drift deeper, the shape of the modern world fades. You could almost believe, in this moment, that time itself has folded back on you. Diving into history isn't about finding gleaming artifacts. It isn't treasure hunting in the old-fashioned sense. It's a careful, deliberate kind of archaeology, one where your tools are not pickaxes and shovels, but gloved hands, delicate brushes, and cameras rigged with underwater housings. And here, just offshore near Beaufort Inlet, it's where Queen Anne's Revenge waits. The wreck lies beneath you now, just a few meters down. Not hidden in some impossibly deep trench, but resting quietly in shallow waters where sunlight still filters through, catching on twisted ropes and barnacle-crusted beams. You hover there in the water, breathing slow through your regulator, eyes tracing the lines of what remains. Queen Anne's Revenge isn't a ship anymore. She's ribs and spine now, broken pieces of hull rising from the sand like bones half buried in earth. Cannons lie tilted at strange angles, iron turned black and soft by centuries of salt. Planks have been worn smooth, grain stripped away until only the ghost of the wood's original pattern remains. Even knowing exactly where to look, it's easy to miss. Nature is quick to reclaim what man leaves behind. Fish weave between cannonballs like stones on a riverbed. Sand covers the deck planks, shifts with the tide, uncovers something new each day. A length of chain here, a piece of pottery there. Divers talk about it like tending a garden. Every visit reveals something, but patience is the only way to see it fully. One well-known fact: Queen Anne's Revenge ran aground in 1718, abandoned not long after Blackbeard's death. But here's a lesser-known quirk. Local fishermen reported strange sights for years afterward. Metal glinting beneath waves, the dull thump of old wood knocking against rocks in a storm. Some even claimed to hear chains rattling beneath the water on still nights. Whether superstition or not, those stories kept the wreck's legend alive long after most other pirate ships had been forgotten. And here's that lingering question. How much of Queen Anne's Revenge was truly lost to the sea, and how much was simply waiting for patient hands to uncover it again? You swim forward, gloved fingers brushing along the edge of a cannon, now almost completely fused to the sand. It's difficult to imagine it once roared with fire and iron. Harder still to picture Blackbeard himself standing above it, beard smoldering, as he ordered another broadside. That moment feels impossibly far away now, softened by water and time. Nearby, another diver gestures, waving you closer. You kick slowly through the water, fins slicing gently with each stroke, careful not to stir too much silt. The diver holds up something small, round, and dark, half buried in a drift of sand. A piece of grape shot, perhaps, or a musket ball, trapped here for 3 centuries, waiting for someone to notice. You pull out your brush and begin working carefully around the object, sweeping grains of sand away in slow, practiced circles. It's tedious work, but there's no rush. Each movement is measured, deliberate, like pulling back layers of time, one grain at a time. Above your head, sunlight flickers in shifting patterns, dappling the beams and boards with broken gold. Schools of fish pass through now and then, flashing silver as they weave between what's left of the ship's ribs. You pause for a moment, watching them move, imagining the crew that once stood here, boots thudding against the deck planks, voices raised in argument or laughter, powder smoke curling in the air. It's not hard to see, not here. Each section of the wreck tells its own story. Toward the bow, timbers lie piled in tangled layers, signs of how the ship broke apart during storms and years adrift. Divers believe this area once held supplies. Barrels of rum, crates of gunpowder, lengths of rope coiled like sleeping serpents. There's nothing left of those now, just the faint outline of where they once sat. Toward the stern, heavier pieces rest deeper in the sand. Anchors half buried, brass fittings turned green with corrosion. And at the very center of it all, the remains of the ship's helm. A single warped wheel, its spokes long since rotted away, but the hub's still visible if you look closely enough. The real treasure here isn't gold, it's these small details. The curve of a hull plank, the mark of a craftsman's tool etched into metal, fingerprints carved into history by men long vanished. It's strange, drifting through it all. Time doesn't feel the same here. Minutes stretch into hours, the steady rhythm of your breath filling your ears, bubbles rising like silver beads toward the surface far above. You could stay like this for days, moving slowly from one piece of wreckage to the next, cataloging, measuring, preserving. And that's exactly what the teams have done for years now, dive after dive, season after season, building a picture not just of the ship, but of the life that once moved across her decks. You surface after what feels like both an hour and a lifetime, breaking through into sunlight that feels suddenly too bright, too sharp after the gentle shadows below. The dive boat rocks gently beside you. The other divers climb aboard, pulling off masks and fins, faces marked with the quiet satisfaction that only comes from this kind of work. Not excitement, not triumph, just steady, deliberate progress. As you haul yourself up onto the deck, boots thudding against the boards, you glance back once more toward the water. The waves roll gently now, no sign of what waits beneath. But you know it's there, quiet as ever, waiting. One of the team members logs the dive details, time in the water, depth, artifacts noted. Another begins carefully bagging the small piece of shot recovered today, tagging it with date and location coordinates. Everything exact, everything methodical, because this isn't about a single discovery. It's about building a living record, bringing Blackbeard's ship back into the light, one careful step at a time. You sit back against the rail, watching the coastline drift closer as the boat heads for shore. Modern Beaufort rises slowly into view. Rows of pale wooden houses, old brick streets, churches older than most of the country. But even here, history isn't just something you read in books. It breathes beneath your feet. It waits beneath the waves, and in the quiet spaces between dives, between charts and artifacts and preserved fragments, the thought always lingers. How many other ships sleep beneath the world's oceans, waiting for hands patient enough to bring them back? In the years following the first confirmed discovery of Queen Anne's Revenge, the question shifted. It was no longer, did they find her? That had been answered. The shape of the wreck, the dimensions of the hull, the anchors, the cannonballs, all of it pointed unmistakably to Blackbeard's lost flagship. What remained now was quieter, slower, but no less important. What did she still have to tell? The process was meticulous. Recovery teams worked season after season, drawing up items from beneath the sand and salt one piece at a time. Each artifact lifted from the wreck required not just careful handling, but immediate treatment. 3 centuries beneath the sea meant every plank and nail had been transformed. Salt embedded itself in every fiber. Iron, exposed to oxygen again, could crumble to dust if not properly treated. So each discovery was logged, tagged, submerged in freshwater baths and chemical solutions. The same care you might give to an ancient painting or a priceless relic. One well-known fact: over 300,000 artifacts were recovered from Queen Anne's Revenge. But here's a lesser-known quirk. Most of those items weren't grand treasures or weapons. They were small things: nails, bits of rope turned to mineral shells, shattered pieces of ceramic plates. The artifacts now fill rows of shelves and display cases at museums along the Carolina coast, places like the North Carolina Maritime Museum, where visitors come to peer into glass cases holding iron grape shot, musket parts, pewter spoons worn smooth by use. You step through those halls slowly, boots quiet against polished wooden floors, eyes moving from case to case. There's a kind of reverence to it. No loud tour guides here, just quiet plaques and soft lighting. One display holds navigational instruments, a brass divider for chart work, an astrolabe darkened by age, parts of a ship's compass housing. Another case holds tools, a surgeon's kit, its blades and clamps rusted, but still recognizable. You imagine the hand that once held them steady during rough seas, cutting away splinters or stitching a wound beneath the creak of timber in the snap of canvas overhead. It's the smaller things that seem to linger with you most. A pair of cufflinks shaped like small skulls, a pipe stem carved from clay, a pewter button stamped with a faded emblem. Each one whispers of a man long gone, a crew member aboard Queen Anne's Revenge, carrying his own quiet story. And yet, despite all that's been recovered, there are gaps. Obvious things missing. One major absence. No sign of Blackbeard's personal effects. No weapons traced directly to him. No personal pistols. No distinctive blade or marked powder horn. Historians debate whether these items were taken by Lieutenant Maynard's men immediately after the battle, claimed as trophies, or whether they were lost during the ship's grounding, washed away by tides, or buried deep beneath layers of silt still untouched by modern divers. There's also the matter of the treasure. Legends surrounding Queen Anne's Revenge always spoke of gold, silver, Spanish coinage hidden somewhere aboard. But from the wreck, not a single piece of obvious treasure has been recovered. No chests filled with doubloons. No jewelry beyond a few plain rings. One well-known fact is that pirates didn't keep their wealth in giant hoards aboard their ships. More often than not, prizes were divided quickly, spent in hoard. But here's the lesser-known detail. Queen Anne's Revenge was unusually large for a pirate vessel. Large enough that hidden compartments could have existed. Secret holds designed to stash valuables in places even an experienced boarding party wouldn't find. And there's that lingering question historians love to circle around. Was there a hidden treasure aboard Queen Anne's Revenge that still waits beneath the sand? As you stand before the museum displays, reading the quiet descriptions beneath each item, the thought lingers. It's not just about gold. It's about completing the picture. about finding the last pieces of a puzzle that refuses to fit together cleanly. You leave the museum and step back into the sunlight. The sky is sharp and blue overhead, gulls wheeling in lazy arcs. But the questions drift with you as you walk along the waterfront. Later, on another dive trip out to the wreck site, the same quiet work continues. Divers lower themselves into the green-gray water, following ropes down to the wreck's edge. Brush by brush, artifact by artifact, the story grows clearer. But some things may always remain missing. A lesser-known quirky: no ship's bell from Queen Anne's Revenge has ever been found. Most large ships from that era carried one, both for keeping time and signaling through fog. Whether it was stolen after the grounding, lost in the sands, or simply never existed aboard this particular vessel remains uncertain. And then there are the human remains, or rather the absence of them. No crew bones, no burial markers. It's not surprising. Men abandoned ship quickly after her grounding. Those lost in battle would have been left aboard Queen Anne's Revenge, but none have been found. The sea reclaims all in the end. You can't help imagining Blackbeard's own weapons resting beneath some undisturbed layer of sand. His pistols, said to number 6 at his belt, still loaded and primed. Or perhaps they were taken and melted down centuries ago, turned into coins or scrap, long before historians ever set sail in search of the wreck. And there's always that final thought. Maybe some things are meant to remain missing. Maybe part of the power of Queen Anne's Revenge lies in what isn't recovered, in the gaps left behind for imagination to fill. You lean against the rail of the dive boat once more, eyes drifting over the same stretch of calm inlet that holds the wreck just beneath its surface. Below, divers move slow and steady, pulling another day's worth of small items from the sand. Each nail, each cannon fragment, each bead of glass or sliver of pottery. Not treasure in the old sense, but treasure all the same. Because what they found is already more than most lost ships can claim. And what's missing ensures the story doesn't end. Even after years of dives, careful recovery, and quiet museum halls filled with artifacts, Queen Anne's Revenge doesn't feel entirely solved. There's a weight to that wreck still, something that resists easy answers. You notice it the longer you stand near the water's edge, eyes tracing the smooth horizon where sea meets sky. It's not just what they found, it's what they haven't. And more than that, it's what doesn't quite add up. The mysteries begin with the wreck's location. On the surface, it makes sense. Queen Anne's Revenge ran aground near Beaufort Inlet, where the shoals turned suddenly shallower, the channels split like veins through sandbanks. It was a dangerous spot even for careful sailors, let alone a pirate crew weighed down with loot and powder. But historians can't fully agree. Some claim the grounding was deliberate, that Blackbeard knew the risks, steered her there to block passage or to make repairs. Others argue it was an accident, careless piloting, wind too sharp against the sails, or a tide stronger than expected. One well-known fact: pirate ships often ran aground near safe ports to offload goods discreetly. But here's a lesser-known detail. Queen Anne's Revenge wasn't the only vessel Blackbeard commanded at the time. He had a small flotilla, smaller ships that could have helped him escape if this was truly planned. Yet there's no record of where they all went that day. Some simply disappeared into history. And that's the first mystery. Was it all part of a larger design? Or just the end of the line for one ship? You walk along the modern boardwalk now, listening to the quiet lapping of waves against pilings, picturing what those last hours aboard Queen Anne's Revenge might have looked like. Men moving across the deck, sails snapping, officers shouting orders. Blackbeard himself standing tall at the helm, deciding whether to turn back or press forward. It's a scene no painting captures exactly. Too many questions in the details. The wreck itself offers more puzzles. Divers report that certain parts of the ship don't match others in age and construction. Some timbers appear to be from repairs, made after her time as La Concorde, but others seem even older, possibly salvaged from previous ships. Recycling materials wasn't unusual in the early 18th century, but it complicates the wreck's story. Queen Anne's Revenge wasn't just one ship. She was parts of many pieced together over years, carrying not just Blackbeard's legend, but fragments of other, quieter stories lost along the way. And then there's the issue of the armament. Official records and recovered artifacts show she carried up to 40 guns at her height. But not all of those cannons have been found. Some remain buried or missing entirely. It raises more quiet questions. Were they removed before the grounding? Hidden somewhere ashore? Sold or traded by Blackbeard in some final deal before Ocracoke? One well-known fact: Blackbeard was known as much for his psychological tactics as for raw firepower. His ship didn't need every gun loaded. It just needed enough to terrify. But here's the lesser-known quirk. Some historians believe he may have deliberately kept parts of Queen Anne's Revenge lighter, removing guns when needed to increase speed or maneuverability. A pirate's ship wasn't just a floating fortress. It was a tool. And tools get modified. You pause near the edge of the dock, watching as a dive boat heads out once more toward the known wreck site. Even now, even with GPS coordinates marked down to the exact decimal, even with grids and sonar, there are still gaps. Sections of the wreck remain unexamined, covered by years of sand and silt that no team can afford to disturb too quickly. Shifting even a few inches of sediment risks damaging what lies beneath. And that's part of the second major mystery. How much of Queen Anne's Revenge still lies hidden? Every dive reveals small shifts. After storms, after strong tides, divers return to find areas newly uncovered, parts once visible, now buried again. It's a ship in constant motion, even in death. You step into the local archives building, walking past rows of old maps, letters, and half-forgotten reports. One framed document catches your eye, a British naval record describing the capture of Blackbeard and the grounding of his flagship. The handwriting is stiff and formal, but there are gaps even there. Details left blank. Descriptions vague. It's as if the men writing it down weren't sure how much they should record and how much should be left to rumor. A lesser-known quirk. The British weren't always honest about pirate captures. Political pressure shaped the reports. Governors wanted headlines. And Blackbeard wasn't just any pirate. His name carried weight. The truth of exactly how his ship fell may have been deliberately softened or sharpened for effect. And there's the final, lingering question historians ask every time they examine a new artifact or scan a new section of wreckage. What happened to the crew? Some were captured, of course. Some tried to escape and were caught in later raids. But others simply vanish from record. Their names fade from logs. Their stories stop mid-sentence. Were they absorbed into other pirate crews? Did they vanish into port cities, living quiet lives under new names? Or did some slip away with pieces of Queen Anne's Revenge's legacy in hand, gold, weapons, journals, now lost in private collections or buried beneath old houses along the Carolina coast? You walk back outside, boots thudding quietly against weathered planks. The sky overhead is pale now, clouds drifting in long, thin lines. The air smells of salt and old wood. Queen Anne's Revenge is a puzzle with missing pieces. It always will be. And maybe that's what keeps the story alive. Because for every artifact pulled from the sea, for every cannon cleaned and displayed, there are always questions waiting just below the surface. And so the divers keep returning. The historians keep writing. And those walking along the docks at Beaufort can't help but pause sometimes, staring out across calm water, wondering what still waits beneath the waves. The battle may have ended centuries ago, but Queen Anne's Revenge didn't stay buried. Piece by piece, plank by plank, cannon by cannon, her remains came back to the surface. But pulling history from the sea is only the first step. What happens next is quieter, slower, and in its own way, just as delicate as any boarding action ever carried out by Blackbeard's crew. You're standing now inside one of the preservation labs in North Carolina, watching as salt-crusted iron is eased from a tank of fresh water by gloved hands. The room smells faintly of chemicals and steel, a dry, sterile scent completely unlike the salt air outside. Light filters in through wide windows, falling across metal racks and shallow tanks lined up in careful rows. Some hold cannons, others hold smaller pieces, buckles, hinges, tools. All of it submerged in clear liquid, pale shadows flickering across the surface like ripples in a calm bay. The process of preserving artifacts from Queen Anne's revenge starts the moment they leave the water. Divers don't just haul them aboard and leave them out to dry. That would destroy them faster than the sea ever could. Salt trapped inside iron, wood, and ceramics turns destructive once exposed to air. Crystals form, metal flakes away, wood splits and crumbles. So each item, whether it's a 2,000-pound cannon or a small pewter spoon, is sealed, tagged, and moved immediately into controlled conditions. One well-known fact: iron artifacts from shipwrecks must be soaked in fresh water for years to remove salt before stabilization can even begin. But here's a lesser-known quirk. Some items require different methods entirely. Wooden planks, for example, must be treated with polyethylene glycol, a special wax solution that replaces the water within their fibers, keeping them from shrinking and cracking. And there's the quiet question museum workers ask themselves every time a new piece arrives in the lab. How much of this can we save, and how much is already too far gone? You walk slowly between the tanks now, eyes tracing the outlines of what rests within. One tank holds a massive anchor, its flukes curved like claws, blackened and pitted, but still solid. Another holds a row of cannonballs, some no larger than a man's fist, others nearly twice that size. Each one marked with a small white tag, date recovered, dive number, coordinates. Preserving history isn't glamorous work. It's measured in weeks, months, years, sometimes decades. A single cannon may spend more than a decade in treatment before it's ready to display in a museum. And there's no rushing the process. One wrong chemical balance, one careless shift in temperature, and an artifact could be lost forever. You step closer to one of the long work tables, where smaller items are laid out. Tools for cleaning lie beside them. Fine wire brushes, dental picks, ultrasonic wands. Museum staff sit quietly, faces bent over their work, scraping and brushing in patient silence. On one table sits something that catches your eye, a pewter plate, worn down to a dull gray disc, its edges marked with faint lettering. You lean in, reading the inscription slowly. It's not Blackbeard's name, not some grand declaration of ownership, just the mark of a pewter smith from London, dated 1712. A quiet signature across time. That's what much of preservation is. Finding these small touches, these quiet details that tie a wreck back to the living men who once sailed her. One display in the lab holds personal items recovered from the wreck. Buttons, clay pipe stems, shards of glass bottles, each one cleaned, stabilized, mounted in soft foam. Some pieces are barely larger than a thumbnail, yet here they sit, saved from the sea. A lesser-known quirk, the lab's lighting is specially calibrated. Too much brightness can fade colors, heat metal. Too little, and the fine work of restoration becomes impossible. It's all part of the careful balance. Preserve, but don't alter. Clean, but don't erase the story written in rust and salt. And always, always the lingering question: what should be displayed for the public, and what should be kept behind closed doors? Not every artifact from Queen Anne's revenge makes it into the museum galleries. Some items are too fragile. Some are redundant, dozens of identical cannonballs, for example. And some simply hold more meaning in the lab than in a glass case. You walk back to one of the larger tanks, pausing beside a team working on a newly recovered anchor. Two museum techs in blue lab coats move around it slowly, brushing away the last of the surface crust before lowering it back into solution. Their movements are steady, practiced. Neither speaks. It's not dramatic work. There are no crowds gathered here. No songs written about this part of the story. But without it, everything else would fade away. One well-known fact: artifacts recovered from saltwater wrecks without preservation begin to decay within days. But here's a lesser-known quirk. Even properly preserved artifacts can never fully return to their original state. The sea leaves its mark in ways that no brush or chemical bath can erase. And maybe that's part of the story, too. You step outside again, blinking against the sunlight. The lab's clean white walls give way once more to the warm wood and soft salt air of the Carolina coast. Behind you, inside those tanks and quiet workrooms, Queen Anne's Revenge lives on, not as a ship anymore, but as pieces carefully preserved against time. And as you walk along the dock once more, boots tapping a slow rhythm against sun-warmed planks, it's impossible not to think about the hands that once held those same pieces in life. The men who loaded those cannons, the crew who ate from those pewter plates, the surgeon who wielded those rusted tools beneath flickering lantern light. Preservation is as much about them as it is about the ship itself. Because in saving these fragments, in keeping each piece safe against decay, you're keeping their story alive. From the moment Queen Anne's Revenge was confirmed, from the first iron cannon brought up out of the inlet and laid down carefully on the deck of a modern salvage ship, the story began to change shape. No longer just the grim end to a pirate's career. It became something larger, something that stretched from the quiet seabed near Beaufort Inlet into museum galleries, guidebooks, school lessons, television documentaries, and soft murmurs between visitors who stepped slowly past glass cases, eyes flicking between rusted artifacts and the reflection of their own faces. It's a strange thing, watching history step up onto dry land. Stranger still when that history belongs to pirates. You find yourself now inside the North Carolina Maritime Museum in Beaufort, where the largest collection of recovered artifacts from Queen Anne's Revenge is on display. It's quieter than you expected. No loud music. No piped-in shanties or dramatic lighting effects like you'd find at a theme park. The light here is gentle and warm, focused down in narrow beams over carefully arranged displays. Wooden floors creak faintly beneath visitors' feet. The air smells faintly of salt and old wood polish. You move from case to case slowly, taking your time. It feels almost like stepping through the wreck again, but with everything cleaned, labeled, and placed just so. One long glass case holds a set of medical tools recovered from the wreck: rusted clamps, a saw, a curved blade you can't help but recognize as meant for amputation. The tools are darkened by time, but still sharp in their shape, laid out on soft black fabric like offerings from another world. One well-known fact: over 300,000 artifacts have been pulled from the wreck. But here's a lesser-known quirk. Most people only ever see a handful. Museums don't have room to show it all. And much of what was found isn't as glamorous as people expect. Not treasure chests or golden goblets. Nails, buckles, simple things. The things that make up life. And that's the quiet truth lurking beneath every display. Queen Anne's Revenge wasn't just a legend. She was a workplace. A home. A floating city for her crew, as rough and temporary as it might have been. One display catches your eye. A cannon set upright behind thick glass. Not polished to a shine, there's no point in pretending it's new. The iron is dark and pitted. Barnacle scars run along its length, evidence of years spent beneath the sea. But it stands solid, heavy, quiet. The museum guide standing nearby mentions that it spent nearly 20 years in preservation tanks before it could safely be displayed. You step closer, eyes tracing the curves of the metal. You can almost hear it firing again. smoke curling up from its mouth, the sharp, deafening crack of iron in powder. But here, in this room, it sits silent. Further down the gallery, you come to a series of panels detailing Blackbeard's life, his rise, his final battle. Maps trace his voyages in clean, sharp lines. New Providence, Charleston, the Outer Banks. You run your fingers lightly along the edge of the display glass, eyes following the path north toward Ocracoke Inlet. The words beneath are clean and measured. Edward Teach, known as Blackbeard, died 1718. And yet, as you stand there, it feels larger than a single man's story. One display holds reproductions of pirate flags, each one carefully stitched onto black canvas. The Jolly Roger, of course, but others too. Skeletons holding hourglasses, bleeding hearts. Blackbeard's own supposed flag, a horned skeleton raising a glass while holding a spear pointed toward a heart. The guide mentions that no one's certain if that was truly Blackbeard's flag. It wasn't recorded until long after his death. But myth and fact blend easily in rooms like this. The story grows beyond its roots. You walk on, boots thudding quietly against polished boards. School children pass you in small groups, pointing and whispering. One leans in close to a case holding a pewter plate, tapping the glass before a parent pulls them gently back. There's a sense of quiet wonder in the air, not loud excitement, more like reverence. One lesser-known quirk. Local museums saw visitor numbers triple after Queen Anne's revenge was confirmed. Shops along the waterfront sell Blackbeard t-shirts, mugs, flags. Beaufort holds an annual pirate festival now, complete with costumed reenactments, mock battles on tall ships rigged out for show. What was once a feared name has become a celebration. But alongside all the myth, there are always those quiet details waiting to pull you back to the real. At the center of the gallery stands one of the largest artifacts recovered, a section of Queen Anne's Revenge's hull, reconstructed from preserved timbers. You step up to it slowly, eyes tracing the rough grain of the wood, each plank carefully mounted and supported by steel frames. It's shaped like a rib cage now, curved beams rising upward like bones frozen in mid-motion. A small plaque reads, "Recovered 2001, preserved over 18 years. Original placement, starboard midships." You reach out and press your hand lightly against the safety rail. There's no touching the wood itself, but you can feel its presence. Heavy, solid, real. Because that's what this gallery does. It turns myth back into something you can stand beside. And yet, the transformation isn't complete. As you leave the gallery and step back into the bright Carolina afternoon, Blackbeard's name lingers. On signs, on t-shirts in shop windows, on brochures tucked into racks along the boardwalk. One final plaque near the museum's exit reads simply, "From wreck to legend, the continuing story of Queen Anne's revenge." And it's true, because while the museum preserves the artifacts, the legend belongs to everyone now. As you walk along the waterfront, past docked sailboats and small seafood restaurants with chalkboard menus out front, the air smells of salt and fried fish. You pass a small group of children gathered around a costumed pirate, listening as he tells the story of Blackbeard's ghost still wandering the inlets on foggy nights. Their faces light up with nervous smiles. You pause there, listening too, watching as the pirate points toward the horizon with a theatrical flourish. And in that moment, it's easy to forget the quiet halls and the glass cases. Easy to believe, just for a breath, that Blackbeard himself might still be out there, beard smoldering, pistols at his belt, standing at the helm of a ship that refuses to sink completely into silence. That's the balance historians walk every day, between what's proven and what's imagined, between preserved cannonballs and stories told at sunset, between shipwrecks and shadows. And so, as the sun sinks low over Beaufort, casting long golden paths across the water, the story of Queen Anne's revenge folds into the background once again. Because while one crew's story ended aboard that ship, another was unfolding on shore, beneath painted ceilings and crystal chandeliers, in grand halls far from the salt and smoke. And so, we leave the wreck for now, turning next to that quieter world, to powdered wigs, polished silver, and the measured voice of colonial governors holding court, where life was no less dangerous, only slower, quieter, hidden behind marble walls and locked doors. The morning light that spills through the windows of a sea, British colonial governor's mansion, carries a different weight than the harsh sun beating down on a ship's deck. It's slow, filtered through heavy linen drapes, softened by thick glass panes imported from London, set into tall sash windows framed with carved wood. You wake slowly here. No jolting wake-up calls from a deckhand's boot. No sudden roll of the hull beneath you. Instead, there's quiet, a deep, settled kind of silence, broken only by the faintest creak of polished floorboards as someone moves bellow stairs. You lie there for a while, half awake, listening. Somewhere in the house, water is being poured into basins. Silver spoons clink faintly against china cups. A clock ticks evenly from the hall, its brass pendulum swinging in calm, predictable arcs. Everything about this place is ordered, controlled, measured. Your bed is not just a simple frame. It rises tall, wrapped in velvet hangings the color of old blue ink, gathered back now to let in the morning air. The sheets beneath you are fine woven linen, cool against your skin, smelling faintly of lavender and starch. Feather-filled pillows cradle your head in quiet luxury. Even the weight of the blanket has been chosen carefully. Not too heavy, not too light, stitched from imported wool dyed in muted gray. When you finally sit up, feet touching the floor, there's a moment of pause. Your boots aren't waiting by the door in a muddy heap. Instead, a pair of soft leather slippers rest neatly beside the bed, placed there sometime before dawn by a servant moving silently in the dark. You stand, moving slowly toward the tall windows. The floor beneath your feet is polished wood, dark oak brought over in planks from England decades before, creaking softly beneath each careful step. No creaking ship's deck here. Just steady, unmoving boards arranged in perfect rows. Drawing back the curtain fully now, you let the light in. It pools across the room in pale golden sheets, catching on the edge of a dressing table, flickering over the silver handle of a small hand mirror left carefully in place. Below, the governor's gardens stretch out in formal lines. Hedges trimmed with geometric precision. Paths laid in crushed oyster shell and white gravel. Statues placed at even intervals, Roman figures, mostly, brought in as a symbol of learning and order. Water glitters from a stone fountain in the center. Birds flitting back and forth between low walls. Beyond the garden lies the harbor. Merchant ships sit at anchor, their sails furled and rigging drawn tight. Masts rise like a second forest beyond the wall, tall and silent against the morning sky. A few small boats already move between them, ferrying goods from ship to shore. No pirate flags here, only neat rows of British ensigns, bright red against the pale sky. One well-known fact: colonial governors lived much like country lords, keeping estates patterned after English manor houses. But here's a lesser-known quirk. Those grand houses often hid small compromises. Bricks fired from local clay, softer than those made in England. Pine boards where oak had run short. Glass panes thinner, more likely to warp under the heat. Each house was a blend, part England, part Carolina, caught somewhere between two worlds. You move to the washstand now. A pewter pitcher sits ready, filled with fresh water drawn from the household well. It's cool when you pour it into the basin, the surface rippling quietly as it settles. There's no running water here, no modern pipes, but every need is provided for. A linen towel waits folded on a nearby rail. Soap sits in a small carved dish, scented faintly with bay leaf. You wash slowly, wiping sleep from your face, running damp fingers through your hair. The scent of wood polish mixes with the sharp bite of iron in the water. It's a different kind of morning routine than aboard a ship. Slower, quieter, but no less ritualized. A knock comes at the door then. Precise, not hurried. 3 quiet taps, evenly spaced. You turn, calling out a quiet word of assent. A young man steps inside, one of the household servants. His coat is dark blue, buttons polished bright. He carries a small wooden tray in both hands, eyes lowered as he crosses the room to set it down beside the washstand. On the tray, a folded sheet of thick paper, sealed with red wax. The governor's mark pressed into it, a lion and crown. Official correspondence. There's no need for spoken words. The servant bows slightly and withdraws, closing the door behind him with a soft click. You reach for the letter slowly, breaking the seal with your thumb, unfolding the stiff paper to reveal its contents. The handwriting inside is crisp and elegant, slanted letters, ink dark as coal, notices from London, tax adjustments, reports from the outer plantations, or perhaps word of pirate activity along the coast. Blackbeard's name has been whispered through these halls before. Even now, months after his death, rumors cling to his memory like barnacles to a hull. One lesser-known quirk. Many colonial governors began their mornings reading by candlelight, reviewing orders long before breakfast. It wasn't simply about control. It was about staying ahead, keeping the colony's gears turning smoothly, while the world beyond the walls shifted in unpredictable ways. You fold the letter carefully again, setting it aside for later reading. There will be time. At the wardrobe now, you dress slowly. Layers built one atop the other. Linen shirt, wool waistcoat, silk breeches dyed in deep navy blue. Stockings pulled up over the calves, tied with silk garters. Shoes polished to a quiet shine. Powdered wig waiting on a stand nearby. Light gray, carefully curled. Even here, far from London, appearances must be maintained. Stepping fully dressed to the window once more, you glance out over the garden below. The gardeners are at work now. 2 men in simple coats, shears flashing in the morning sun. One trims a rose bush. The other edges the path, scattering fresh gravel as he works. Beyond the wall, the town is waking fully now. You can hear the market square stirring, vendors calling out prices, carts creaking as they're drawn over cobblestone streets. The smell of fresh bread drifts faintly on the air. The mansion is quiet, but not still. Somewhere below, in the dining hall, breakfast is being laid out. Silver platters. Fresh tea imported from England. Eggs, salted fish. Bread baked just that morning in the estate kitchens. You step toward the door, hand resting lightly on the brass handle. Another day begins, not with the roar of cannon, not with sails snapping in the wind, but with measured steps along polished floors, with ink and paper, with decisions made behind closed doors. Because while pirates ruled the sea, governors ruled everything else. And here, in the quiet heart of the colony, the balance of power is as carefully maintained as the lines of a formal garden. Breakfast in the governor's mansion does not begin with shouts or rushed footsteps. It begins with measured calm. By the time you descend the wide staircase, polished rail cool beneath your hand, the household has already laid everything in place. Servants move in quiet rhythm, placing dishes on long tables lined with fresh linens. The scent of tea, black and strong, steeped in silver pots, drifts gently through the air. Not overpowering, subtle, like everything else in this house. The dining room is large, but not ostentatious, paneled in pale oak, with tall windows letting in the morning light. Paintings hang along the walls, landscapes, ships in calm harbors, portraits of lords and kings long removed from these shores. Each frame is heavy, gilded, but softened by years of quiet dusting and care. The long table at the center gleams with a dark sheen of wax polish, and each place setting waits with deliberate formality. Porcelain plates from England, pewter utensils, linen napkins folded in precise triangles. You take your seat at the head of the table. A high-backed chair carved with quiet flourishes, not gilded, not flashy, just solid, meant to convey weight rather than wealth. The other chairs are smaller, placed evenly along each side. Not all of them will be filled today. A few secretaries, perhaps a local magistrate, come to discuss court matters. But this is not a crowded table. Power here is exercised in smaller, quieter groups. One well-known fact: British colonial governors were given wide authority over their colonies, acting as both political leaders and representatives of the crown. But here's a lesser-known quirk. Much of their time was spent not in grand councils or dramatic speeches, but in quiet rooms like this one, managing endless layers of paperwork. And there's the unspoken reality historians often circle around. While pirates captured the imagination, governors captured the paperwork. The first dishes arrive on quiet feet. A servant places a covered silver platter before you, bowing slightly before lifting the lid. Eggs, soft-boiled. Bread sliced thick from loaves baked that morning, still warm to the touch. Salted fish arranged in neat rows beside pickled onions. Nothing extravagant. Colonial kitchens rarely wasted flourishes. But everything is fresh, prepared with careful attention. Tea is poured next. Dark liquid spilling in slow curls into a waiting porcelain cup, its edge rimmed with a thin line of blue glaze. You lift it slowly, sipping once, feeling the sharp warmth cut through the cooler air of the morning. By now, your first guests arrive. Two men step into the dining hall, one a clerk, tall and narrow-shouldered, carrying a leather-bound folio under his arm. The other, a local merchant, judging by his coat, less ornate than yours, but carefully tailored. Their greetings are soft, voices low. No need to announce names here. Everyone already knows each other's place. The clerk takes a seat to your left, the merchant to your right. Plates are laid before them without a word. Breakfast here is not a loud affair. Conversation flows in slow, measured exchanges. Topics shift easily from trade routes to tariffs, from minor court cases to the latest shipments from England. One moment, you're discussing sugar imports from Barbados. The next, you're reviewing letters reporting pirate activity spotted near the Outer Banks. That's where Blackbeard's name comes up again. Not as a threat, but as a point of paperwork. One of the clerks mentions a petition from local merchants seeking compensation for goods lost to piracy the year before. The numbers are read aloud in flat, steady tones. Barrels of molasses, crates of textiles, weight in pounds and value in pounds sterling. One lesser-known quirk: even long after pirates were gone from a region, their presence lingered in ledgers and lawsuits for years. Governors spent just as much time managing claims and debts as they did hunting actual criminals. A servant refills your tea, moving as quietly as a shadow. Your clerk opens the folio, sliding several sheets of thick paper across the table. You glance over them slowly: tax forms, property disputes, orders from London regarding trade restrictions. Each document bears the crisp seal of some official department. Each requires your review. This is the heart of colonial bureaucracy. Not grand decisions, but steady streams of parchment and ink. Approvals and denials. Edicts drafted in careful language pass through 3 or 4 layers of signature before becoming law. You sign each page slowly, dipping your pen into a brass inkwell set beside your plate. The ink smells faintly of iron and oil, slick against the nib of the quill. Your handwriting is steady, clean, practiced loops and flourishes. As you work, the conversation turns toward more local matters. Repairs needed for the harbor wall. A recent shortage of bricks from the kill outside town. A brief debate over whether to impose new levies on imported tobacco. One well-known fact: Colonial governors had the power to adjust taxes within certain limits, but always with London's approval. But here's the quieter truth. Those limits were often stretched in practice, especially in distant colonies where oversight moves slowly. And there's the question every governor quietly weighs: how much authority to exercise openly, and how much to hold in reserve. You finish signing the last document as a servant clears the breakfast plates. The room smells now faintly of tea and warm bread, mixed with the sharp scent of sealing wax. Another tray is brought in, this one holding fresh sheets for the day's correspondence, letters to be written, orders to be drafted. Your clerk mentions a request from a plantation owner upriver, a dispute over land boundaries. It's the sort of matter that requires not just legal review, but quiet diplomacy. Too heavy a hand could unsettle trade. Too light a touch could encourage further disputes. You pause a moment, looking out the tall windows again. The garden below is in full sun now. The rose bushes gleam with dew. Beyond them, the harbor is busier. More ships moving between docks, sailors unloading crates, horses pulling carts along the quay. It's easy to forget, sitting here in quiet wood-paneled rooms, that the world beyond the estate walls keeps moving with its own rhythm. And yet, everything returns to this room eventually. Every coin spent, every barrel taxed, every crime judged. Breakfast is long finished now, but the work continues. Pens scratching quietly across parchment. Pages folded, sealed with wax, stacked in neat piles, awaiting messengers. A lesser-known quirk. Messengers in colonial governments often traveled with written orders sewn into their coat linings to guard against theft or loss. By late morning, the dining room is cleared, the table wiped clean. Your clerks gather their papers, bowing slightly as they step back into the hall. You rise slowly, stretching your legs, boots thudding softly against the floor. Another quiet morning. Another set of papers signed. Another layer added to the quiet machinery of the colony. And tomorrow, it will begin again. By late morning, the rhythm of the governor's household shifts once again. Breakfast has been cleared, correspondence written and dispatched, but the true business of the day still lies ahead. This is not the part of the morning spent in private study or wandering the quiet garden paths. Now, it is time for the governor to step into the council chamber, where decisions must be weighed and voiced in the company of others. Power in a colony does not rest on one man's shoulders entirely. It is shared, measured, distributed like carefully portioned coin. And so, with slow, deliberate steps, you walk through the tall corridors of the mansion, past wooden panels polished to a soft glow, past servants standing quiet along the walls, and into the high-ceilinged council chamber where men already gather. The chamber feels cooler than the other rooms, the wide windows let in strips of sunlight along the upper walls. The long, horseshoe-shaped table stands at the room's center, its surface gleaming with fresh polish. Chairs are already being filled, men in dark coats with high white collars, each face lined and practiced, each movement precise. These are council members, planters and merchants and judges appointed to serve alongside the governor. Their hats rest on their knees or sit placed on the table's edge. No man here raises his voice. The silence is not tense, but weighty, deliberate. Each moment spent waiting carries its own sense of expectation. You take your place at the head of the table, where the chair is slightly larger, slightly more ornate, though still restrained. The governor's seat bears no gold leaf, no extravagant decoration. It is heavier, more solid, carved from dark oak with a simple crest etched into its back. It speaks not of wealth, but of responsibility. Behind you, the governor's seal hangs in quiet shadow. A lion, a crown, a reminder that though this colony lies an ocean away from London, its ties to the crown are never far removed. One well-known fact is that councils in British colonies served as legislative bodies, drafting laws and overseeing colonial governance. Yet a lesser-known quirk is that much of their work took place not in loud debate, but in steady, unbroken silence as papers were passed, votes counted, agreements made through glances and nods rather than speeches. Historians often imagine these councils as fiery chambers filled with heated arguments, but in truth, they operated more like clockwork mechanisms, slow, deliberate, every piece moving according to its own well-worn groove. A clerk stands now at the far end of the room, pale light glinting off the brass fittings of his inkstand as he opens the meeting's docket. His voice is steady and clear, reading each item from a page that lists matters both grand and small. Trade tariffs to be reviewed, land disputes to be settled, requests for militia funding, merchant petitions regarding piracy claims. The words fall into the room like stones dropped into still water, each one sending out its quiet ripple. The first matter at hand involves trade tariffs. London has sent word suggesting an increase in levies on goods imported through the colony's ports, sugar, tobacco, tea. Such adjustments are not made lightly. Already, the room feels heavier as council members lean forward in their seats, hands folded, brows furrowed. One of the planters speaks first, his voice measured and low, pointing out that further tariffs could strain already tense relations with local merchants. Higher prices on goods would ripple outward, affecting not just the wealthy, but the smaller farmers and town traders who depend on regular shipments. Another council member counters calmly, noting that without the increased funds, maintaining local militia forces would become more difficult. Protection against piracy still demands resources. Blackbeard's death may have ended one chapter, but his shadow still drapes itself over every ledger. The conversation unfolds in careful turns. No man speaks out of turn. Voices rise only slightly, and never above the steady scratch of the clerk's pen as he records each statement in the council's minutes. You listen closely, offering your own thoughts when needed, balancing the weight of each argument with the practiced steadiness expected of a governor. It is not always about having the strongest opinion. More often, it is about shaping the conversation so that it arrives, eventually, at a conclusion that serves both the crown and the colony alike. One lesser-known quirk is that council minutes from these meetings survive in heavy-bound volumes, carefully preserved in archives, yet they capture only the words spoken aloud. What they miss are the silences, the moments where a pause carries more weight than any sentence, where two men meet each other's eyes across the table and understand a shared position without ever voicing it. After the tariff debate is settled, with a vote tallied in favor of a measured increase, the council turns its attention to land disputes. Maps are unrolled across the table, long sheets of parchment weighed at the corners with brass pins. Thin black lines mark out property boundaries. Rivers curve in pale blue ink, forests shaded with faint green. Settlers along the river's edge have petitioned for new land grants, but the requests overlap with older claims already held by established families. Such matters are delicate. Too heavy a hand, and loyal colonists may feel slighted. Too light a touch, and disputes could escalate into private feuds. The maps shift gently as hands move over them. Fingers trace boundary lines. Quiet murmurs pass between council members as each considers the matter. Again, no voices rise in anger. It is all carefully contained, like water poured slowly from a jug into a steady vessel. You examine the maps yourself, weighing the possibilities. It is not just a matter of acreage. These decisions shape the colony's future, where farms will grow, where roads will run, which families will rise in prominence, and which will fade into the background. The vote is called after a long pause. Again, it is measured, hands raised, counted, recorded. Hours pass in this way. One matter after another, laid upon the table, discussed, decided, written down. Midway through the session, servants bring in fresh tea, carried in silver pots alongside small plates of bread and cheese. No grand meal is taken here. Just the quiet fuel needed to keep men's minds sharp through the long proceedings. As the afternoon shadows begin to stretch longer across the polished floors, the final item is brought forward: piracy reports. The clerk reads them one by one, voice steady as ever. Merchant vessels attacked near Shackleford Banks, smugglers captured near Cape Lookout. Though Blackbeard's ship lies beneath the waves now, his legend is not the only one haunting these waters. Other captains rise to fill the void he left behind. Smaller names, perhaps, but no less dangerous. The council room grows quieter as these reports are heard. It is not fear that settles over the men gathered here, but a kind of reflective weight. They know too well the cost of such lawlessness. Goods lost, lives risked, the delicate balance of trade disrupted. One member speaks quietly, his hand resting on the edge of the table. Blackbeard may be gone, but the sea still stirs. We must be sure our patrols remain funded. Our waters must remain secure. You nod, signing off on the necessary orders. It is not a dramatic moment. No loud declarations. Just ink drying on parchment. Authority expressed in slow, steady handwriting. As the final votes are cast and the last page is signed, the council session draws to a close. Chairs scrape back from the table. Coats are gathered. Hats lifted from hooks along the wall. Men bow slightly as they take their leave, voices dropping once again to quiet farewells. You remain seated for a moment longer, watching as the room empties. The late afternoon sun casts long slats of golden light across the polished floorboards. The oil paintings along the walls seem to glow faintly in that light, the king's portrait watching over the room with an expression as measured as the decisions just made within it. Another council meeting concluded. Another layer of governance lay quietly across the colony like an invisible net. No cannon fire, no roaring crowds. Just quiet order, recorded in ink and sealed with wax. And as the mansion settles back into its late afternoon quiet, you rise from your chair at last, stepping out into the hallway where the day's final tasks still await. By late afternoon, the quiet formality of the council chamber gives way to a different kind of duty. The governor's authority does not end with pen and paper. It extends beyond polished floors and heavy oak chairs to the open drill grounds outside the mansion, where rows of soldiers stand waiting beneath the wide Carolina sky. Inspection of the troops is not merely a show for visitors or a ceremonial gesture. It is a necessary ritual, a measured, practiced review of the colony's strength, both to reassure those who depend on order and to remind those who might challenge it that power here is not abstract. It wears boots. It carries muskets. You step out into the bright afternoon air, boots crunching softly on the packed gravel path that leads from the mansion's main entrance down toward the parade grounds. The sun has risen higher now, no longer softened by the long shadows of early morning. Its light casts sharp lines across the tall brick walls that encircle the estate, gleaming off brass buttons and polished musket barrels. Ahead, a company has already assembled. Rows of red-coated soldiers stand in precise lines, muskets resting against their shoulders, boots planted square on the packed earth. Their faces are set and serious, expressions schooled into careful neutrality. The officer in charge steps forward to meet you, hat tucked under one arm. His coat is dark blue trimmed with gold, a mark of his rank. You exchange a brief word, a formality, nothing more. The real communication happens without speech. It happens in the way each man stands, the angle of each musket, the cleanliness of each uniform. One well-known fact: British colonial governors were charged with maintaining local militias to enforce law and protect trade routes. But here's a lesser-known quirk. These militias were often a mix of professional soldiers sent from England and local recruits drawn from the colony itself. The balance between the two could be delicate. Professional soldiers brought discipline. Local men brought knowledge of the land and waters. Too many of one or the other could tip that balance in unwanted ways. You step down the line now, moving at a steady pace. Your boots stir up small clouds of dust with each step. Eyes glance toward you, quick, flickering, then straight ahead again as discipline takes hold. The inspection begins at the first rank. You pause before each man briefly, noting the shine on his brass fittings, the condition of his musket's barrel, the set of his shoulders beneath the weight of his coat. Each uniform is checked not just for appearance, but for readiness. A loose button or a rusted buckle is not simply a mark against appearance. It's a sign of laxity, of something deeper that might weaken the colony's defenses when they're needed most. One lesser-known quirk. Many colonial soldiers carried weapons, marked not just with the king's seal, but with small personalized carvings, initials scratched into the wood, symbols burned into the barrel's base. Officially discouraged, but quietly tolerated. A man fights harder with a weapon he feels is his own. You pause before one soldier, a young man, no more than 20, face flushed slightly from standing so long in the sun. His musket's barrel gleams. His boots are well kept, but a small thread hangs loose from the cuff of his sleeve. A minor detail. Yet you notice it all the same. The officer beside you sees your glance and makes a quiet note on a folded paper. No reprimand today, but it will be addressed. The inspection continues. Down each row, across each line. Muskets checked, bayonets examined for sharpness, powder horns secured at each man's side. At the end of the line, the company's small artillery detachment waits beside two wheeled cannons, their barrels already cleaned and burnished. The wood of the carriages is painted dark green, iron fittings tight and freshly oiled. You step close to one of the cannons now, running your hand lightly along its barrel. The metal is cool beneath your fingers, silent, but heavy with potential. One well-known fact: colonial militias relied as much on artillery as on infantry when defending harbors and towns from pirate attacks. But here's a quieter truth. Many of these cannons had been in place for decades, shipped from England and never replaced. Maintaining them was an act of constant vigilance. A single crack in the barrel's mouth, a single flaw in the powder measure, and the weapon became as dangerous to its crew as to its enemies. You straighten slowly, glancing up toward the mansion's roofline in the distance. From this angle, its pale walls rise clean and solid against the blue sky, framed by the rustle of oak trees along the estate's edge. But the real power rests here, on the ground, in these rows of men, in the weight of iron and powder ready to be brought to bear at a moment's notice. The officer calls the company to attention with a sharp word. Muskets snap up in unison. Boots shift against gravel in perfect rhythm. The sound carries clear across the parade ground, echoing faintly against the mansion's stone walls. One lesser-known quirk. During inspections, a governor's glance could carry as much weight as an order from the crown. A raised eyebrow, a silent pause. Men noticed, and they remembered. You nod once. A small gesture, and the officer begins to dismiss the ranks, one line at a time. The soldiers turn with practiced precision, moving off in steady pairs toward the armory building beyond the parade ground's edge. By the time the last man has stepped away, only the officer remains beside you, cap tucked once again beneath his arm. You exchange a few final words. A note about the next muster, a comment on the condition of the artillery, and then the grounds fall quiet once more. As you turn back toward the mansion, boots crunching softly in the dust, there's a certain calm that settles over you. The papers signed that morning, the debates held around polished tables, the letters sent across seas, all of it depends on the strength you've just reviewed. Governance may begin with words, but it is upheld by steel. As the sun begins to lower beyond the tall trees edging the governor's estate, painting the sky in long streaks of amber and pale rose, the quiet rhythms of the day shift once more. The military inspection is finished, the council session complete, and the last letters have been signed and dispatched by courier. Yet even as the outward duties of the governor seem to wind down, a different kind of responsibility settles into place. One carried not through ink and paper, but through conversation, observation, and the careful balancing of social alliances. Evening in the governor's mansion means a banquet, not just as a matter of custom, but as an essential part of maintaining the colony's fragile sense of order. The grand hall where these dinners are held sits at the eastern wing of the mansion, its tall arched windows catching the final gold light as servants move quietly between tables. The room smells faintly of polished wood, beeswax candles, and the first hints of roasted meats and spices drifting in from the kitchen. Long white tablecloths stretch across heavy oak tables, lined with pewter plates and gleaming silver cutlery. Each place is set with deliberate precision. Folded linen napkins shaped into crisp triangles. Crystal glasses placed exactly 2-finger widths from each plate's edge. No detail here is left to chance. One well-known fact: colonial governors in British America were expected to host regular formal dinners, both to display the colony's refinement and to cement relationships with local power brokers. But here's a quieter quirk. These banquets often served as informal courts of politics, where alliances were made or unmade not through official decrees, but through the simple placement of a chair, the offering of a second glass of wine, or a quiet word exchanged between courses. You enter the hall now as the first guests begin to arrive. Men and women in formal dress step through the tall double doors, greeted by liveried servants who take their cloaks and announce their names in low, steady voices. The guests are merchants, magistrates, military officers, and their wives, all faces familiar from council chambers and private meetings earlier in the day. But here, they wear different expressions. Smiles that are practiced, yet slightly more relaxed. Voices pitched a little lower, hands moving with studied ease as they accept glasses of imported Madeira from silver trays. You step toward the head of the room, where a smaller table waits. Here, the governor takes his place, flanked by the colony's most senior officials and honored guests. It is not a throne, merely the largest chair at the table, but its placement speaks as clearly as any crown. One lesser-known quirk: even the order in which guests entered the hall was often carefully orchestrated, with those of higher status arriving later to mark their precedence. As the final guests filter in, the doors are closed behind them with a soft but deliberate thud. A servant rings a small silver bell, its chime cutting gently through the growing hum of conversation, signaling that dinner is ready to begin. The first course is served on heavy pewter plates, a clear broth seasoned with herbs from the mansion's own garden, accompanied by fresh bread still warm from the estate ovens. Servants move in practiced lines between tables, placing dishes with quiet efficiency. There is no clatter, no wasted motion. Every action is calculated to maintain the atmosphere of restrained elegance. Conversation flows in measured streams as the meal progresses. Discussions of trade and taxes surface once more, but here they are softened by the clink of silver against plate, by sips of wine between points made. No formal votes are taken at these tables, but decisions are shaped all the same, through subtle agreement. Quiet suggestions passed beneath the cover of casual talk. One merchant leans slightly closer to the governor's chair, voice dropping just below the level of general conversation, mentioning concerns about a shipment delayed in Charleston. Another officer from the local militia speaks softly of rumors circulating through the lower docks, talk of smugglers growing bolder, perhaps even whispers of a surviving crew from Blackbeard's last ship. One well-known fact: pirate legends continued to haunt the colonies long after the actual threat had passed, shaping not only law, but the quiet fears of those who dined in halls like this. But here's a quieter detail. Governors often had to navigate these fears as much as they managed real threats, ensuring that merchants felt secure enough to invest, while keeping military officers sharp and prepared. As the second course is served, roasted pheasant accompanied by stewed fruits and a side of boiled vegetables, conversation continues its steady flow. You listen more than you speak now, measuring the mood of the room as carefully as any official report. Certain faces appear more guarded than usual. A planter seated near the far end of the hall keeps glancing toward the door as if expecting news to arrive mid-meal. A magistrate seems unusually quiet, sipping from his wine glass without contributing to the latest discussion on trade tariffs. There is always a layer beneath the surface, a thread of quiet paranoia that runs through even the most polished evenings. In a colony far from the steady reach of London, power depends as much on perception as on law. Who seems nervous? Who holds themselves a little too stiffly, as if rehearsing lines already practiced in private? These details matter. One lesser-known quirk. Governors often kept personal aides positioned quietly throughout the hall during such banquets, not as visible guards, but as observers. Men trained to watch, to listen, to note which guests spoke together a little too long in corners, or whose smiles did not quite reach their eyes. You glance once toward the far corner now, where two merchants stand together, speaking in low voices beneath the flickering light of a tall brass candelabrum. Their faces are calm, but their hands move in subtle gestures, small, quick signs that suggest more than casual conversation. Dessert is served next. Stewed pears seasoned with cinnamon and cloves, presented in delicate porcelain bowls brought in from London at great expense. The scent is rich, but not overpowering, blending with the warm air and soft candlelight, filling the hall now that dusk has settled fully outside. One well-known fact: such banquets often lasted hours, stretching long into the evening as courses followed one another at a measured pace. But here's the quieter truth. The longer the meal, the more opportunity for observation, for careful positioning of words and glances. As the final dishes are cleared and small glasses of brandy are served, the mood in the room shifts again. Conversation slows. Laughter grows quieter, faces leaning in closer as the hour grows later. The servants begin to move more slowly now, their earlier precision softening into a background rhythm of clearing plates and refilling glasses. You remain seated, posture relaxed, but eyes sharp, taking in the room as a whole. The quiet paranoia never fully fades, not in this role. Every guest here is both ally and potential rival. Every smile carries weight. One lesser-known quirk. Some governors kept detailed private journals after such evenings, noting not just what was said, but who seemed uneasy, who left early, who lingered too long near the governor's chair. By the time the evening draws to its formal close, the hall has grown quieter still. Chairs are pushed back, cloaks gathered, farewells exchanged in low, smooth voices. Guests file out slowly into the night, stepping past servants holding lanterns aloft to light their way down the mansion's long graveled paths. You rise last, stepping once more toward the tall windows, looking out over the darkened garden, where only a few torches flicker now along the outer wall. The stars are bright overhead, sharp and cold against the deep Carolina sky. Another day concluded. Another evening's careful balance maintained. The mansion settles back into silence. But as you retire to your private chambers, there is no full rest. The quiet paranoia remains, as steady as the tick of the clock in the hall below. Night settles over the governor's mansion, not in sudden darkness, but in slow, deliberate layers. Candles are lit in quiet succession as the sun's last light fades from the tall windows. The warm glow of beeswax flames replaces the sharp gold of day, casting long flickering shadows across polished wooden floors, along carved stair rails, and into corners where earlier there had only been pale morning light. By now, the last guests have long since departed from the banquet hall. The heavy oak doors stand closed, and the grand dining table sits stripped of linen and silver, its dark surface gleaming faintly in the low candlelight left behind. Servants move through the hallways in soft-footed pairs, their footsteps muffled by thick carpets laid down over the stone. The mansion does not become truly silent, but it softens, as though the very walls are holding their breath. You move through these quiet halls now, walking slowly along familiar routes, past portraits hanging in gilded frames, past glass-fronted cabinets filled with carefully cataloged ledgers and maps, past doors left, slightly ajar, to let the last of the evening's cool breeze stir through. Each room holds its own hush, like chapters in a story read silently to oneself. One well-known fact: colonial governors often kept private quarters set apart from the more public spaces of the mansion. Rooms designed not just for rest, but for reflection. But here's a quieter quirk. Those private quarters often included secret alcoves and passageways, narrow stairwells tucked between walls, small writing rooms hidden behind paneled doors, built as much for privacy as for safety. You pause at the edge of one such door now, resting your hand against its smooth wooden surface. To anyone passing, it would appear as part of the wall, just another panel in the long line of oak boards. Yet a small hidden latch releases it with a faint click, revealing a narrow staircase winding upward in tight spirals. The air here smells of old stone and wax, cooler than the broader hallways. Climbing slowly, you emerge into a small room overlooking the eastern garden. A single desk stands here beneath a tall window, its surface scattered with folded papers, quills, and two brass candlesticks whose flames gutter gently in the evening draft. This is where the quiet work is done after the grand gestures have ended, where thoughts not meant for council meetings or banquets are written down by hand, where quiet observations noted during the day find their place in private ledgers. You sit for a moment at this desk, eyes moving over the darkened garden below. The pathways gleam faintly in the torchlight, still burning along the estate's walls. Beyond them, the lights of the town flicker in uneven clusters. Lamps along the harbor, windows still aglow in merchants' houses, the occasional flash of movement as a rider passes along the outer road. The town does not sleep completely, nor does the mansion. There is always someone awake. Night guards moving in quiet circuits along the estate's perimeter, kitchen servants banking the last of the day's fires, clerks writing late into the night in distant corners of the hall. One lesser-known quirk: in many colonial mansions, the governor's night was as carefully structured as his day. Candles were replaced hourly by servants trained to move without sound. Watchmen kept exact schedules, reporting in regular intervals to ensure the mansion's security. No hour was left entirely unobserved. You dip a quill into the inkwell now, the faint scratch of pen on paper the only sound in the small chamber. Notes are made not for others to see, but for your own record. Reflections on the day's council session, names worth remembering, small adjustments to tariffs or land grants that might require revisiting. From here, the weight of the day feels lighter somehow. The noise of the world outside is held at bay by thick walls and careful routine. Yet beneath that quiet surface, there is always motion. You set the pen aside after a time, rising from the chair with deliberate slowness. The candle flames gutter again as you move past them, casting brief ripples of shadow across the walls. Leaving the small room behind, you step once more into the broader corridors of the mansion. Night has deepened now. The sky outside the tall windows shows no trace of gold or rose, only deep blue marked with thin, pale stars. The moon hangs low and wide above the harbor, beyond the estate's edge, its reflection breaking gently across the water in slow ripples. The halls remain lit here and there with tall standing candelabra, placed at intervals to mark the path from one chamber to the next. You walk with measured steps to the library next, a room lined with high shelves crammed full of volumes shipped from London. Law books, ledgers, histories of English kings, records of old voyages. Descent here is different than in the council chamber or the dining hall. It is quieter, rustier, leather bindings and old ink mixing with the ever-present hint of wood polish and candle smoke. One well-known fact: governors maintained private libraries, not merely as status symbols, but as tools of administration and diplomacy. But here's a lesser-known quirk. Many of those volumes were rarely touched, serving more as quiet markers of order than as true sources of daily reference. You move slowly between the shelves now, fingers trailing lightly along the spines of books long undisturbed. Outside the tall windows, the estate grounds lie in quiet shadow. The drill grounds where troops stood in the afternoon are empty now, marked only by the faint glimmer of moonlight on musket racks stored beneath the armory's covered porch. The banquet hall, too, stands dark, its tall doors closed tight, the echoes of laughter and low conversation long since faded into stillness. As you walk, the mansion seems to grow quieter with each step. The servants have retreated to their quarters. The watchmen pass in timed circuits, their boots faint against the stone outside. The clock in the main hall chimes once, marking an hour long past midnight now. You pause before a tall window, looking out once more over the garden. The roses trimmed so carefully in the morning are invisible in this light, reduced to faint shapes against deeper shadow. Only the scent remains, a quiet trace of earth and living things carried on the cool night air through a crack in the glass. One lesser-known quirk. Colonial governors often walk their halls at night, not simply as a matter of habit, but as a way of maintaining quiet vigilance. In a world where letters traveled slowly, where messages might take weeks to cross the sea, there was always the possibility of news arriving unannounced in messenger, pounding on the gate in the dead of night, bringing word of an uprising, an attack, or some new decree from the crown. The mansion's quiet at night was never meant as pure rest. It was a calculated balance between sleep and readiness. You walk once more past the grand staircase now, pausing at its base. The polished rail gleams faintly in the candlelight. The steps rise in smooth, measured arcs toward the upper floors where your own chambers wait. Yet you linger a moment longer in the stillness below, as though standing at the center of something larger than a single house. This is the governor's world. Not just a house, not just a role, but a constant, layered rhythm that stretches from the council chamber to the garden gate, from the banquet hall to the harbor wall. A world where history is shaped not by battles alone, but by quiet decisions made behind closed doors, by slow walks through candlelit halls, by papers signed long after midnight. And so, as night settles fully over the mansion, the final transition comes not with a sudden end, but with a soft step upward, back toward the private rooms above, where the bed stands waiting and the last candle burns low beside polished brass clockwork. Tomorrow, the rhythm will begin again. But for now, the mansion holds its breath. And as the quiet deepens, we step away from these halls, leaving behind the echo of footsteps and the soft flicker of candlelight. Because while one world winds down here in the governor's mansion, beyond its walls, along the rivers, in the forests, and far out past the edge of the harbor, other stories continue to unfold. Stories not bound by polished floors and formal dinners, but by quieter rhythms still waiting to be explored. Now, as the last flame gutters low, we turn to bring this journey to a close. And that's where we'll leave it for tonight. From the salt-stung decks of Queen Anne's Revenge to the quiet parade grounds outside the governor's mansion. From the rough clatter of pirate boots on weathered planks to the soft creak of polished floorboards under candlelight. A long, slow walk through the layered rhythms of colonial life, where power shifted not just with cannon fire, but with quiet glances across formal dinner tables and silent footsteps through midnight halls. If you're still awake, thanks for sticking with me all the way to the end. And if you drifted off somewhere between the morning muster and the evening banquet, that's perfectly fine too. That's kind of the whole point. If you enjoyed this slower, sleep-friendly dive into history, feel free to like the video and subscribe for more. And as always, I'd love to know where you're listening from and what time it was when you pressed play. It's always a quiet kind of surprise seeing these stories reach listeners in so many corners of the world. For now, I'll let the noise of muskets fade The footsteps along marble floors grow quieter, and the flickering candle flames dim one by one. Sleep well, and I'll see you next time.